Again, we're starting a little late, forgive us, but today we're going to devote most of our time to the evaluation and reevaluation of the preschool as we prepare to enter a new year, 2022, and of course, evaluating and reevaluating is a way to think about the free school. So we want to have W.E.B. Du Bois, Baldwin Reading Group. We will hear again from Bandung and from Lotus, and we have something from Bangalore, India, from Raju and Nanditha, their work, and I think Caleb, you will do MIT again. Is anything I left out? Oh yes, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, Vietnam Mayor. Yes.
Sophie and Nathan.
Oh, and so yes, Sophie and Nathan. Okay. So just a few things to catch up with what's going on. Oh, by the way, hey Danny, that's some great research you did on the internet stuff that you were doing about Marx and.
Oh, great. Sorry.
Wow, man. I have to give you know a lot.
Okay,
You're just a humble servant,
Yeah.
but you do know.
Just a mess and, kind of, yeah.
Just about three things I just want to draw your attention to this morning. Number one, Julian Assange. The British courts have said that he can be extradited to the United States. Julian Assange is a political prisoner. And he is a political prisoner. I mean, he is quintessentially a political prisoner because he is in jail because of his politics. And his politics are that of being a genuine journalist in a time where the United States has carried out renewed wars, especially in the Middle East. Let me just say this. I would say every war that the United States has been involved in since World War II has involved crimes against humanity and war crimes. I don't know quite, the atmosphere during the time of the Korean War, but as I look back upon it, the U.S. committed every kind of crime against humanity in Korea. But I can tell you about the war in Vietnam. And I can tell you about the threats constantly of bombing Vietnam and other Asian countries back into the Stone Age. I grew up hearing that as though it were a boast. We'll teach you. But it's a part of the thuggish essence of the American ruling class. And we can't get around it. Even though, I just parenthetically, the horrible things that we see in the city of Philadelphia, this violence, especially as it affects the black community. We've never seen anything like it. They keep saying since 1990, We've never seen anything like this. A bloodbath. And for Larry Krasner to come out and say, oh, we don't have a spike in crime, everything is okay, this is just it's an insult. It is an insult. And just I can tell you, I always, he was an important change from the Lynn Abrahams and the death penalty people and, that type of thing. But too aloof too unfeeling about ordinary people and their experience with crime and violence in their neighborhoods. And we've had it up to here. Now, we'll talk more about this, what is causing it, who is responsible for it, and there are multiple levels of responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. But for the city of Philadelphia, from the mayor to the DA to the city council, to sit on their hands in the face of this is criminal. But we have said it over and over again, that in a lot of ways, this is not a democracy. It is a kleptocracy, serving oligarchs. And the ordinary person, their neighborhoods don't count one bit. So we'll come back to that. But with Vietnam, with Korea, with the wars in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and what Julian Assange exposed were U.S. crimes, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And of course, they always try to claim that these are wars against autocracy, against dictators, and we're bringing democracy and rights of women and all of this. So much for bourgeois feminism. And I think we really have to get back to this. The whole, how they trump these ideologies, trump genuine freedom, genuine democracy. And these are elite discourses. And I think, Jahan was just telling me about how there's a shift. We see it with certain left forces, or, kind of, and Danny told me about this too, within, what's your organization name again? Platypus. Yeah. How one of their leaders had questioned in 2020 the anti-Trump movement. And now it's playing out, and I'm about ready to take a victory lap. I have to tell you. I was canceled. Hey, look, I went through some rough, but it wasn't that long before Biden exposed him. Well, I'd say the Biden administration was exposed because this guy is completely out. He's thrown, as they say in this, he's thrown off.
Yeah.
The brain cells are diminishing, but anyway, but the extradition of Julian Assange, we have to be, if he is extradited to this country, we must be prepared for activism, for campaigns of education of the people about who he is and what he is suffering. And he is physically and psychologically in bad shape. I mean, for a guy to look like he does at his age and to have aged the way he has aged is a sign that he has been abused in prison. Now, a lot of people keep talking about, well, what got him in trouble is that he raped a woman in Sweden. Well, it turns out that the prosecutors in Sweden, I think it was Sweden, right?
Yeah.
They could not, they threw it out. It was BS. It was garbage. You know what I'm saying? And even, I think the woman or one of the women said, no, that didn't happen. He is not a rapist. He is not that. And that was a lie. And that has been an excuse for the political aims of the war makers, the most vicious war makers on the planet Earth. And they're saying to anyone who would tell the truth, any journalist, be he Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi, Aaron Mate, just a slew of journalists who operate outside of the corporate media, or I would say Alexander Makuris, you know, a lot of stuff on YouTube. Any of that can be shut down immediately, and people who conduct journalism through those sites can be arrested and held as political prisoners. And therefore, I say this all the time, this country is less free today than it was under McCarthyism. You know what I'm saying? I came up, you know, I came up in the Cold War, not the height of the Cold War, but that period, still the Cold War, still American confronting China, the Soviet Union, Vietnam, all that type of thing, Cuba, but universities were still more or less open environments. You'd be surprised. This thing today, where you have to come, you know, with $1 million of insurance to rent a room, you know, where all of the professors are chosen, are tenured on the basis of whether or not they adhere to the dominant line of the ruling class and do not raise critical questions. You know, this idea of public intellectuals, they're not public intellectuals, they're performers, actors. Some would even say comedians.
Bad ones, though.
Bad kind of
Bad comedians.
You're not supposed to laugh at that.
You know, if I could just, and this is, I know I'm,
What do you think? I know I've heard is this a period of new McCarthyism, but I was wondering if you could talk about the distinction and difference or what's changed. But you've already been doing that.
yeah, no, I think this is a far worse time, Danny. You all have nothing to compare it with. But I can say that myself personally, I feel less free, more threatened, politically and ideologically, less able to express views that go against the woke crowd than back then. I really do. And I always want you all to know that this is not a free environment. If you feel that you didn't learn anything in your 4 years in the university, it's probably because you did.
You're not going crazy.
No, and the point was that you not learn anything. Or if you did, keep it narrow. Not a broad education that prepares you to be a participant in world history. Because the point is that you're not supposed to be a participant. You're not supposed to be an activist. You know, we don't want no more Angela Davises. We don't want any more Martin Luther Kings, anything like that. And that's why we have to have a free school. You know, to rescue people who, if you didn't have a free school, would almost have to be in therapy. I guess their free school would be their therapist. You know, but that's what it's designed. And you got it right. What you all are feeling is absolutely right. No student movement in a time where you need one. I think I was talking to you all on the Zoom. I was talking about in the 70s, the great South Korean student movement. Unbelievable. The military killed thousands of students in South Korea, by the way. But now this is a democracy. But in this country, this quote student movement is an arm of the nonprofit industrial complex. And we know who controls that. We could talk more about it, but Julian Assange is a symbol of what is in effect, if you want to use the word fascism, and I don't use that word because because it does not describe the intensity of what we're living under. It's worse than Nazi Germany, frankly. It really is. You'd be surprised. This is a greater control of people. And in the case of Julian Assange, represents that. It is, I mean, I feel it very, very deeply. The brutality, the ruthlessness, the viciousness, and what they're doing to a really good man. He's really being tortured. So let's keep our minds, focused upon him. We'll have to do more. I think we can compare him to Paul Robeson. We might do something on that. I knew Jeremiah had an article on Robeson that got some traction. We might have to do Julian Assange and Paul Robeson, the attack upon the organic intellectual. It's horrible. It is really horrible. The other thing is, we already mentioned Larry Krasner and his statement about violence. It is a bloodbath in the black community. There are nations that have gone through civil wars, like Lebanon, or Kosovo, in the former Yugoslavia, or Serbia. Even nations where there are bombings in their big cities, to have 500 people killed in a few months, that would be like, we hear about the civil war in Lebanon, but I don't think Beirut has experienced what we're experiencing in Philadelphia, and we're not the worst. Philly is not the worst. And the government, hands off. What are you doing in city council? President of city council, don't come around giving out turkeys on Thanksgiving, and my children can't walk down the street. I'm scared to come out at night. This is terror. Now, and so the DA comes out, there's no problem. It's just like when I heard the slogan, defund the police. I said, wait a minute. I was listening to, public radio. I said, wait a minute. What are they saying? I couldn't figure, defund the police. This was last summer. I couldn't figure out what they were saying. The question of the state. You do not dismantle the state and leave nothing to replace it. You know what I'm saying? It's like chaos. Our solution, that's the petty bourgeoisie who lives in the suburbs and does not experience this, or are reckless and don't give a damn. For them to say something like that is to say, well, we'll send social workers in, and you all just have to put up with killing and robbery and mayhem in the poor communities until we get it set up with the social workers, and then more than that, abolish the prisons. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. This is the most reckless, the most irresponsible, the most racist set of proposals you ever heard. And this is in the name of Black Lives Matter. You see what I'm saying? These people, these academics, these people like this need to experience our utter contempt because they're no good and for Larry Krasner and the mayor of Philadelphia and the city council, majority black city council, to act like nothing can be done. A lot can be done. A lot can be done. And I'm not speaking as a disengaged person. It's like I'm involved almost every day in discussing with people who are involved in the anti-violence movement, the grassroots movement, people who've been killed, family members, and this type of thing. This is no small matter. This, what we are experiencing, they say this is the way it was in 1993. That's not true. At the height of the crack wars in Philly, it was not this bad, with no sign of its abating. Except, and I say this, and I hope you guys, are sensitive to what I'm saying, almost like until these wanton killers and people without, I'll talk about the lack of soul, of a heart. I'll tell you how you manufacture that kind of dehumanized human being, and I'll get to that in a minute. But at some point, hopefully, they'll get exhausted from killing one another and other black people. And then it dies down. And a lot in the government, that's the way they see it. Contain it, let them kill till they get tired of killing, and then we're back to where we were, 15 years ago, so to speak. These individuals, in their youth and the young mind, the young male mind is a particular phenomenon, are a direct product of a culture that they imposed upon the black community, as well as the undermining of all institutions that produce a sense of social and human solidarity. You understand what I'm saying? Education produces empathy. Mm-hmm. Music produces empathy. Even, you can't say, well, I came from a broken home. A lot of people come from broken homes. Right. And they become great artists. Louis Armstrong was raised in an orphanage. You know what I'm saying? John Coltrane was raised by his mother in North Philadelphia. Billie Holiday. Mm-hmm. It does not say that because you don't have a traditional family structure that you're going to become a killer. There is something else going on. There's a zeitgeist, a permission to kill another black person. And this is where, and I know it's a controversial issue, not in the free school, of course, of a culture, a capitalist, racist culture imposed on the black community. There is no way you explain. You go from John Coltrane to Snoop Dogg. It was such a disruptive thing. I remember myself, so, I don't sound, how we get from that, Marvin Gaye, all that, you know what it is, and this. And then it was explained, well, they're wearing their pants but because of being in prison. Okay, I can understand that. But the prison culture cannot be an expression of a people's culture. We got prisoners in the black community. We got criminals in the black community. we got people who are ill in the black community. Certainly, conditions explain it. But then, this is what we talked about before. And this is why I keep going back to Eddie's thing of who is responsible. Who introduces policy that undermine public education, that take music out of schools, that where there is no sports program, there is nothing to produce a full human being. That is the responsibility of society. Yes, the family, but the family is a part of society. Our churches, our mosques, our fraternal and sorority, the network of complex intersecting organizations and institutions that make up the black community. That's why sociology ain't worth a dime, academic, because it was the individual. That's not the way we live. We can't survive with that ethos. We cannot survive with that practice. We need churches. We need mosques. We need recreation centers. We need basketball leagues and football leagues and track teams and music programs. Lee Morgan and Art Blakey and John Coltrane, they didn't go to no Juilliard. That would have killed them, of course. Lee Morgan learned to play the trumpet at Bach High School, which a vocational school.
In South Philly?
Somewhat like that, yeah. But I think South Philly, yeah.
It's a bar.
It's a lot of things now. It's been gutted and gentrified to hell, yeah.
It explains everything.
Yeah.
I can show you where Lee was from. One of those little streets that I always talk about with the 2-story houses, and all around him were factories. A lot of ways, people that know jazz say that in terms of virtuosity, Lee surpasses Miles.
Oh, wow.
They say the only person that you can compare with Lee is Dizzy Gillespie and Louis Armstrong. That's how much of a virtuoso he was. And Bobby Timmons, the piano player out of South Philly, went to Central High School. This rich public life that we call the black community has been purposely undermined, distorted, and destroyed. The intellectual life, nobody gave a damn if you went to Temple or because most of our intellectuals, they were ordinary working men and women who wrote poetry, who read books, And I remember all the time, because they were my role models. They would dress in a certain way, like almost Tweety, kind of, you know what I'm saying? Like odd dresses, when there's a symposium going on. They were very, and they would always have albums of jazz. They were jazz people because that represented the most intellectual music. They were readers of poetry. They were writers. They were thinkers. That was the intellectual life. We weren't looking to any professors. And then, of course, I didn't mention our historically black colleges and universities. 95%, 95%, until very recently, of everybody went to college, went to a black college. And that makes a difference because we all had a similar academic experience. And, you know, I say this all the time. And we didn't give a damn what was going on at Harvard. In fact, if a cat from Harvard came to Lincoln, we said, man, look, come on, go back where you came from. You don't have, you know, we don't want to hear that nonsense. I mean, I wouldn't lie. We looked down upon them because we felt that we, as college students, were an arm of the black community, and that it was our responsibility to return and serve the black community. You don't get that ethos today. You don't get it. And we have to restore it, we have to rebuild it. So this corrupt kleptocracy that is run for the interests of oligarchs and billionaires is a government that is against the people. Well, it's a government that does not govern. This city is run by Comcast, Verizon, some banks, University of Pennsylvania, powerful, elite, and white institutions. So you put a front on it. Oh, look, we have a black president of city council. Most people say, so what? He ain't did nothing for the last 35 years, you know? But still, and he's a friend of mine, I have to say, but he's nothing. And I mean, I have to, it's an interesting dilemma that I'm in. I'm terrible, because I know if Dow Clark, if we went to city council today and we went to his office and could get in,
First of all.
you know, yeah, first of all, and I say, hey, Dow, what's up, man? Yeah, these are my colleagues from the Saturday Free School. First thing he will tell, oh yeah, I learned economics from him.
Wow.
He's not lying. I taught political economy in his neighborhood at a place called the Brotherhood House back in the days. And I was teaching political economy, historical materialism, and so on. And then they ran me out of there.
Oh.
The brothers at the Brotherhood House. Michelle's always asked me, you won't write a book. How could I write a book? This is too reveals.
Get right in.
Yeah, no, it reveals too many people I'd be sued. But the brothers ran me out of the Brotherhood House.
That's the title of chapter 6.
Oh, the brothers ran me out.
Look at.
And the reason they ran me out, they said, and Dow was one of the students he learned, because I taught economics there, you know? They said that I was too radical. I could never figure it out. But that was the first time that I lost a job. Maybe not the first, I think, no, that was the second time. I was kicked out of the public schools too. But that I lost jobs in educational institutions. Where people said they were interested in education and learning, but not interested in ideological clarity. It became so regular that I thought it was abnormal for me not to lose jobs. And I still do. If I'm treated good, I feel, well, what did I do wrong? I expect, I'm not making this up, please, don't think I am. I expect not to be treated well in education institutions and by learned professors. That's how normal it has become in my life. And it's not I don't feel bad about it, because I haven't done bad by it, you know. I mean, I don't show any signs of, missing meals or, being home. So, but it's always an attempt to undermine your dignity. And sometimes in these situations, you reflect, you say, well, what did I do wrong? I know I lost my job at Antioch College where I was working and so on because I was asked and decided that I would run for Congress here in Philadelphia on the Communist Party ticket. That's what we'll mention names. You know, and the sneakiness of people who will smile in your face and then propose, well, we have to let him go. There was no reason to let me go. I mean, this is a radical center of the Antioch system, very radical, but we have to let him go. And I just, you know, I just went, but I still ran for Congress. And then, of course, the last thing was Temple. And Malefe Asante was bold enough or ignorant enough to say it openly. He's not a scholar, he's nothing but a communist apparatchik. And this is, I think that was the icing on the cake. That was the most extreme of it. And so interesting. Only Joe Schwartz, the social democrat in the political science department, Lewis Gordon for a minute, and then he buckled and went with Asante and them. You know? But, and the DSA at Temple were really supporters. I mean, and with science, DSA support, but most professors, most black professors at Temple and at the University of Pennsylvania, and I could name them. I could name them. First of all, let me, I know I'm going on a little bit, but just to help understand. Look, we always talk about the virus, the poison, the toxicity of anti-communism. Now, anti-communism is not really directed at just the communists, or mainly at the communists. That's the irony of the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? W.E.B. Du Bois, when he was imprisoned in the early 1950s, was accused of being an agent of a foreign government, by which they meant an agent of the Soviet Union, a communist, right? Paul Robeson, he may have been a member of the Communist Party or not, I don't know. He was close to the world movement for peace. He was not a communist. Martin Luther King was not a communist. So anti-communism is a broad umbrella to undermine those leaders who represent the democratic aspirations of the people. It's so, you know, having been a member of the Communist Party publicly and all of that type of thing, you would be, I mean, of course you ain't gonna go up to nobody and just, I'm a communist, and I'm not that BS, you know, where you have to put on some act. But most people, be they in unions, be they in churches, they want to know who you are, what you stand for, what are your values, you know what I'm saying? But the ruling class is always terrorizing the people. You know, oh, they're communists, you gotta watch them. You know, so much so, my father was an immigrant, and he was always, you know, very, and not just him, but everybody, don't sign your name to anything. They would always say that, don't sign your name. That was the biggest thing, because the FBI might get your name. I mean, that was already a recognition of the failure of democracy. You know what I'm saying? But these academics, in the face of Asante, And when he used the language he used, I could only assume, since it was the language of the FBI, who had heard the formulation, a communist apparatchik, recently? I mean, that's from the deep 1950s. You know? I mean, I'm a communist apparatchik? What the fuck is that? I don't even know what that is. Yeah, I'm serious. To use that language, then I have to assume, oh, you with the FBI, money. Oh, you an FBI agent provocateur. And I still hold to that. In fact, remember we went over New York and I spoke at Glenn Ford's thing? And I said, I didn't call him an FBI agent, you know, in the memorial, because it would not have been appropriate. Because it was a memorial for my brother who had passed. But I made it clear. This is a counter-revolutionary parading under a dashiki. You understand? Oh, I'm African-centered. So the fuck what? So was Mobutu, who killed Patrice Lumumba, along with the FBI. So, but this did not disturb the intellectual sensibilities of most academics. And I particularly take umbrage at black academics. Oh, you can speak out on everything. Now, I don't include Cornel West. I don't include Angela Davis in this. They're different. But most of them, nothing. So it is anti-communism. And we study that here. We talk about it. Its multiple variations and forms. And I guess that's what, makes us. I think about this because I always think about the free school. Why often such hesitancy to join the free school or become active with things the free school does? And I could name names, so-called in the movements, so-called, since we did Winston, Pan-Africanist. See, that's one of the shields or the covers, the veils of counter-revolution. Winston was absolutely right. He was absolutely right, and we still, we're going to do more. But you so black, and that's what super blackness. That the communists are your enemies, just like the capitalists. And there is no evidence for that anywhere in history. You know what I'm saying? Or I have friends, because I'm so much a part of the black community. Every kind of discourse, every kind of formulation, I hear it all. Well, we can't trust them. We can't trust white folk. Well, we can't trust a lot of black people. Let's be real. Critical thinking is critical thinking. Political principle is standing on principle. You know what I'm saying? Believe me. And this, who you trust and don't trust, let's be real. Political and moral trust is rooted in principle. What does the person stand for? What are their values? Like Martin Luther King talked about a complete life. Complete life. And that's the way the ordinary people think about things like this. We could see that, as we're talking here, we're holding classes, people seem to be working and coming through, listening to every word we say, as they should. They want to know. People want to know. I guess the last thing I want to talk about, my stories, is Joe Biden's Democracy Summit. Now, I'm almost about to fall on the floor, cracking my sides in laughter. Joe Biden and democracy? Joe Biden, do you know who Joe Biden is? Well, I'll just start with the Crime and Anti-Terrorism Bill of 1994, which led to the imprisonment and bringing under the control of the criminal justice system more than 1/4 of young men in the African American community. Some people say, well, oh, they just locked them up and then they got out of jail. Yeah, but what you did, in effect, a lot of the disruption and impoverishment of the black community is that you took out of it young working class men who could have been productive parents, fathers, workers. So you say, they broke the law. Oh yeah, but you wrote the law in such a way that targeted them. In other words, the anti-crime bill of 1994 was in effect an anti-crack bill, and if you sell powder cocaine, you get 2 months. If you sell crack or had crack in your possession and were convicted 3 times, you can get life imprisonment. But the fact of the matter is, no other community experienced this horrific situation, and we're still paying for it. That's why I'm down with what Eddie said. Who is responsible? So, Joe Biden, okay, he's brain dead. I admit it. The man is losing brain cells, faster than, cells reproduce, and then when you lose them faster than you reproduce them, you're in deep trouble. Boyfriend is in deep trouble. And I can't feel any sense of empathy for it because he's dirty. He is dirty. He is filthy. Filthy. See, back in his days, you see him shuffling along all like that, can't walk, can't put a sentence, and you don't halfway know what he's saying, and everything is teleprompter and all that. Look, back in his day, look, from the little state of Delaware. First of all, you don't represent nobody. Secondly, who you do represent are the credit card companies. You know what I'm saying? This guy, back in his day, was a terror. Arrogant. He was the new Ted Kennedy. He's Irish, Catholic, drink hard liquor, womanized. But here is the quintessential kleptocrat. He is in office to steal for his brother, his sister, his son Hunter.
And ain't nobody forgot.
No. So he's shuffling along now, frail, the good grandfather. Don't we? No, he's dirty. He did things to people, horrible things, and just like Bill and Hillary Clinton, I don't have no feelings for them. Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton, do you know who this man is? See, and once you go to that anti-crime bill, and then right behind that, the welfare reform bill. This is a Democrat, so-called liberal. You understand where I'm coming from? And then Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama destroyed Libya? No. No feeling. There is no lesser to evil in that situation. Or if you're going to do that, they might be the evil.
Right.
You You know what I'm saying? When you really, and this Joe knows, when you study it and you look at, there's no hiding place for that. Terrible. Now he's going to come out and perpetrate a fraud on the world as a Democratic summit, democracy, and we're defending democracy against authoritarianism. See, you know, I don't mind a cat, you know, coming to me. You know, you got a lot of hustlers.
Right.
You live in life, you know, you run into hustlers. And a hustler, you know, a hustler might not be a bad person. It's just a person trying to make ends meet and trying to separate you from your money. And see, a hustler always tell you like this: fair exchange is no robbery. But you don't know what the fair exchange
He said in terms of fair exchange.
But hustlers are hustlers. You know, a lot of times a hustler, you know, shoots crap, pool player. You know, a hustler usually does not have a job. But it's all right. You understand? For all kind of reasons. Maybe that person didn't learn to read good enough in school, so he can't fill out an application. You know, so he goes to street life and street hustling. Okay. But one thing that a hustler always tries to do is insult your intelligence. I could take somebody lying to you, but don't try to insult my intelligence. Joe. And then you got these two freaks, this Jake Sullivan, and I always say, look like that cat from the movie Halloween, standing over your bed with a knife. This is the ugliest young man You know, he's only 44. I mean, you wouldn't know it if I didn't tell you. Bad looking, and just nasty. His attitude, you get a cat like him, you know, you come up want to do looking down on everybody, and he going, you know, direct the world. I represent the government of the United States, so y'all need to get back and all that. Then you get this other cat, not Anthony, Anthony. Got to keep it English. I mean, it's insulting to your intelligence. A Democratic summit. But everybody knows what it is. It's a front for preparation for war. It's a front for the preparation of war. I listened to Biden's speech. Now, you know, Vladimir Putin is a very brilliant man. Xi Jinping is very brilliant. But they have a cadre of brilliant people. One thing about these emerging states like China, so a lot of very, very smart people. It's not a kleptocracy. You know what I'm saying? Because one thing in China they will do, they will lock you up if they catch you. And they do have the death penalty for stealing from the state. They still do have that. Now, you know, I'm not going to get into the merits of the death penalty, but I'm just saying in China they have that. So if you're thinking about stealing, you got to think of it. So it's not a kleptocracy. The possibilities of a genuine human democracy exist in China, believe me. And to the extent that Putin and the forces around him have saved the Russian state, because what it was supposed to become is a puppet regime of the West. I mean, something that Russia for over 1,000 years had never become and had fought against. The Napoleonic Wars, Tolstoy, War and Peace. What is it about? Saving Russia, the soul of Russia. That's what Putin represents. But he's brilliant. Now you get these guys. And then you get, brain dead. It's, you know what I'm saying? So, and then you get Sullivan and Blinken thinking they super slick. And then, here is the most evil one, Victoria Nuland. I'm not even going to mention Samantha Powers. Humanitarian intervention. All right, you got to kill all my leaders. That was humanitarian?
Right.
To liberate the women of my country?
Right, for what?
Yeah, right. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's a lie. Just one last thing. I don't know how many people, I think Jerry, you may have watched it. I think you may have watched it, Johan. This discussion between Judith Butler, Cornel West, and Glenn Greenwald. I don't know how many people watched it. I couldn't watch it all. First of all, the topic is so trivial given everything going on in the world that it was a waste of brain power to even conduct such a nonsensical thing. The other thing about it is that outside of Greenwald in certain ways, they were unable to establish the context for the rise of identity politics and cancel culture. Cornell came close to it, talked about neoliberalism, but not, he was more concerned, and this is a problem. I love Cornell. You perform too much for the white elite. You see what I'm saying? Let's get to the point. I don't have to have a quote of William James writing to John Dewey. Okay, you know that.
Right.
I'm impressed. You know what I'm saying? Let's get to the real. What is this, and what is the political motivation, ideological motivation for it? Judith Butler, who is supposed to be the greatest living philosopher of our time. I'm about ready to be picked up off the floor from laughter, but it was, she was so superficial with the appearance. See, this is the thing, appearance and reality. The appearance of sophistication and profundity. You dig what I'm saying? I've been trained over the last 50 some or more years on how to drop the right word at the right time in the right sentence to make you think that I'm really deep.
Right.
So the average person look at that and say, well, wow, man. She's kicking. But it was, I didn't watch the end of it. I intend to watch the whole thing. I was told by Raju and Nanditha and Jeremiah and everybody, Doc, did you watch it? I said, I ain't watched it yet. The topic didn't interest me. I'm not interested in a rehash of identity politics, of bourgeois ideology that is not identified as bourgeois ideology.
Right.
That's what makes, it's so troubling. Okay, if you're going to do it, connect it to the dominant forces in the ruling class. Why did they loud out here like this? Why did capitalism become woke in 2020 when it wasn't woke all of 400 years? So now we woke. Why is Ibram Kendi a pseudo-intellectual, if there ever was one, paraded around, and his book is required reading in the CIA? Okay, now you gonna walk around here like you so black, and I know him, he was a student of mine. You blacker than black, and you down with Malefe Asante. Well, if you all that, why is your book required reading in the CIA? And And now the CIA is woke.
Put it.
You know, I mean, you dig what I'm saying? Or, and I'm going to end. I mean, what is this whole thing all about? What is the 1619 project coming out of all places, the New York Times? I could see if a group of professors maybe at Howard University, or even at, a white college, because professors are liable to come up with anything. They specialize in anything but the real. If you say, well, that's why you all feel so alienated. You say, well, you talking like you all that, you coming into class and you got the hippest, you got your jeans all tore up and, like got that look. You understand? You know what I'm saying? You so hip, you sitting on the desk. I'm just saying, if you all that, if you so down, well, step to the ruling class. Yeah. I mean, if you so, hip, you listen to only the most radical hip hop, you know what I'm saying? And, yada, yada, yada. And anybody that critiques hip hop, you ready to go to blows with them. Well, hometown, step to the ruling class. Oh, no, I can't do that because I have to get my identity established first. And for all the LGBTQs in the house, I want you to know that I'm down with y'all.
Right.
Except for the LGBTQs in the homeless shelter.
Say that.
You know what I'm saying? I'm down with the elites of the LGBTQs.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I've been down with the LGBTQs all my life because I grew up in the church with the LGBTQs. But this identity politics distorts all human aspirations for democracy and progress. And I listened to that, and Cornell, and I said to Raju, because he asked me, I said, look, man, because Cornell talked about American imperialism and Chinese imperialism. Right there, everything else you said after that was nullified. That one statement. Because you have thus established that you are positioned on the side of American imperialism. There is no Chinese imperialism.
Right.
What is the evidence of it? Well, first of all, what do you call imperialism?
Right.
What is your definition of imperialism? Now, there are books written on it. There's scientific treatises, finance, capital, Ilford. I mean, however you want to roll. But just don't be throwing words out. And then going behind that, then you're going to quote a letter that William James wrote to John Dewey. It's obscurantism. You know what I'm saying? In a time where people need ideological clarity, when people need ideological clarity, it's something else I want to say. Okay, that's just, okay, I talked too much. But Michelle asked that I talk about some updating before we get, unless, anybody want to say anything? Go ahead, Jay.
I feel like today I feel like you're on a roll a little bit.
Too much.
But
This is my stand-up.
You got it, Doctor.
But you know something, Jake? I'll say this. If you can't see the humor and absurdity in a lot of these people, it's like the emperor without clothes. And one of the things, just because I'm older than you all and been around seeing this so many times, I try to establish through sarcasm and I guess I don't know the difference between sarcasm and satire. I get them confused. Forgive me.
Yeah.
But to show that the emperor has no clothes, that what they're talking about is hollow. That's all. That's why I have a kind of a humor with it. I'm sorry.
No, it's understandable because I mean,
They
well,
call it gallows
yeah.
humor sometimes.
Like gallows humor. That's an idea. I will say, I like what you said about the zeitgeist. And I like that because there is a zeitgeist that it's almost like driving black people like to kill themselves, and that's what the state wants. The state wants all black people killed. You know, it comes out in the ghetto, and in Iran, and in Iraq, and in China. They want, you know, I mean, if they can't have you as a slave, they don't want you at all. You know, to kind of put it like that. I feel like, see, one thing I always try to understand, like why, or I talk to people like why killing happens, or you know, like why do you listen to the music that has or you know, talks about all the killing. And you know, I start there because when I had that conversation with a friend, he had told me that he listens to that music because he knows people that go through stuff like that, which brings it to that moment where black people are in, or see what happens is the mindset. There's something that kind of takes over, you know, when someone's pride is pushed so far. You know, I think I'm having difficulty kind of articulating it, but what I'm trying to say is that when it becomes everybody else, you know, when you're so mad at the world, you know, you take it and you drive that hatred that the ruling class has taught. Well, it's taught you to have that self-hatred. You bring out on other people, and I mean, you just see it. Like, I talked about it before on Instagram, like people getting like killed. You know what I mean? And first of all, what that does to someone who sees it, what it does to a civilization that has to like watch people get like from around the corner being killed, and then what it does to like them, like those people themselves. I feel like it is a zeitgeist, but what I'm trying to articulate is what I see like a reoccurring problem that in the mindset, like when people talk about problems that they're having, they don't talk about themselves and their role in their problems. You know what I mean? They talk more so like he did this to me, or he did this, or they did that. And I feel like that comes back to like the importance of like Baldwin, the importance of taking responsibility for one's own actions. Because I feel like we'll never really be able to do anything with anybody if nobody can understand what they can do for themselves. And because it's like we can preach ideology all day, but we're not really talking about the same thing because we never really understand where somebody's coming from. And so, because like there's different pieces I feel that are involved. I feel that black people killing themselves plays into the stereotype or lends credence to black people needing to be saved. You know what I mean? Or like the Iranian women or the Afghani women, like that's just the same force that Baldwin describes, that okay, black people need to be saved, or the darker people of the world need to be saved, and that's the moral justification for these NGO programs, for these humanitarian programs. They need to be saved. But what's happening, I feel, is that black people's, because Baldwin describes two forces in his book Evidence of Things Not Seen. He describes the one force, the white force of the world, that idea that I was talking about, that idea of needing to be saved. The other force is that black people have nothing to lose. You know what I mean? You take. We don't have anything to lose, and that I feel personally, politically, however, I think as a people we don't have anything to lose, but we're turning that against ourselves. I think that's where that gun violence thing is coming out as. We're turning it against. It's being purposed against ourselves, and so we don't. And then.
Can I ask you a question? You say black people have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
I would say black people have a lot to lose. A lot to lose. I mean, that's. But why would you say have nothing to lose?
In terms of what was taken.
Yeah.
In terms of the history of degradation. degradation.
think about that,
In terms
though.
of the history degradation.
Yeah, yeah.
What I mean,
Yeah.
I guess what I'll say is, I think that, you know, what has to happen is, there's that, what has to, like, and this I kind of get to when we talk about the Winston, but it's, you know, the combination of personal responsibility and ideology
I can understand.
as a, you know,
And that-
you know.
but I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
yeah.
No, no.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I hear you very clearly. Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was like kind of theoretical. I don't know if it
No,
was.
no. It's, I hear you. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I had a question that is going to jump off of what Jake said and also your presentation or whatever that you're just going for at the beginning. How would we have a kind of productive conversation about the question of the police? So on the one hand, you mentioned, like last summer, for example, the people who were saying defund the police, the same people that were just, you know, blowing up buildings in impoverished neighborhoods and stuff like that. These are the same people who would say defund the police, and it's like hard to take them seriously. It's like, oh, you're going to bring more violence upon these neighborhoods. You also mentioned as well, like, the Joe Biden bill. And of course, this thing happened under we want more police to protect our neighborhoods. Is it Hillary Clinton who called people super predators? She called young black men super predators. And so I guess the question is, how does one have then a productive question about the police? Because, you know, but it's Lenin, right? The state and revolution, kind of thing like that. So I just wanted, that's a question for everyone.
And it has to be put on the table.
Yeah.
And it's, again, a question of transition from what we have to what must become.
Yeah.
But I don't think that anyone would get much support for calling for anarchistically the collapse of all institutions of society in the name of freedom.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, that idea, Jake, freedom from, that negative freedom. So, you know, there are many things that people have called for over the years, including community control, reforming the police, a number of things within the framework of a bourgeois legal situation.
Is there anything wrong with that?
No, there's nothing wrong with that. And, but you see the problem. And this idea that would get support from the black community, it was met with complete outrage in the black community. You know?
My opinion on this issue is that the prisons have become such a burden on the state. The state is trying to let go
Absolutely. That's a
of
good
that
point.
population.
Because
Especially
they
like-
privatize prisons also.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Is instead of prisons, it becomes more benevolent. Like, oh, HP will fund collars that you wear at home, and oh, it's not. You're in jail, but you're in your home.
Yeah.
And you know you're free, but you're really not. There's a geo fence, and then HP and Amazon will benefit.
Yeah.
And
Oh, those are made by Amazon? Those are made by Amazon.
I'm sure they will
Oh,
be.
okay.
I mean, there's Amazon is big data, so they would be collecting the data and comply. You would trust Amazon to do that. Or HP does it for the fishermen in Gaza. HP does it at the border for illegal immigrants. But the defund the police movement is going to run into basically running alongside the ruling class is what it wants in the continuing the privatization of prisons.
Can I ask you a question? What the ruling class wants, that formulation. Do you think the ruling class in this crisis knows what it wants? You know, I mean, I think sometimes we might give them, when we say the ruling class, we're not just talking about the billionaires, but those who serve their interests, which is much larger, runs into the millions of bureaucrats, intellectuals. So, do you think they know what they want?
That's tough, but I think.
I mean, they know they want to stay in power,
Yeah.
but how to do that,
I think they're incompetent.
that's what I'm getting
Well, also,
at.
I think the number one thing that they want is to maintain control But I mean, you could blame it on incompetence. But also, the reality is that the contradictions that they're facing are so immense.
Yes.
It's becoming harder and harder for them to maintain control. I mean, it's like I don't know, like a person like in the rodeo or something trying to stay on the bull, you know,
Yeah,
because the contradictions are so immense. They're much more immense, like you're saying, than they were back, you know,
Absolutely.
even 20 years ago, let alone 50 years ago. And particularly the ruling elite in this society, the challenge that they're facing from the world is so immense. And the system which they have it's struggling to maintain itself, also because of the fact that the historic pillars that they had, those are crumbling. I mean, the fact that the support from the white working class, all the benefits they were able to give the white working class, have the white working class function in essence as a pillar of the system, that's no longer tenable, and you're having mass resistance, mass revolt among the white working class. Similarly, even societies and elites of other countries which were also allies of the United States and in effect served as pillars, those are also no longer willing to go along with the U.S. elite. And then the fact the financial system, the economic system, like this inflation, for example, I mean, it shows that the elite may not even understand how political economy works, you know, because on one hand Biden is like, oh, we've reached the peak of inflation. On the other hand, you're getting other forecasts from the Federal Reserve and other experts.
Record inflation yesterday.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, all of that is showing that the number one thing is to maintain control, but it's becoming very challenging. I mean, I don't envy them being in their position personally.
I just want to bounce off this question again because I don't know the answer, but yeah, it's curious because is inflation something that the ruling classes has their eye on and they understand, and
That's what he's saying, they don't.
but what if it's intentional and
Oh, I see.
it's not, the hand is in, you know, when the Snowden files were released, there was that slideshow about manipulating society and people, and one of them was the big move covers the little move. You know, repeated persistence reduces vigilance, and this is if you're trying to persuade someone or groups of people. And you know, so I always wonder, does the big move cover the little move? And you know, how vigilant do we have to be? But so is this a mistake, or is this the left hand distracting you? And so I just want to reiterate, I don't know, that's a question I think about.
Well, we do know that with this record inflation, there has been I think also a record transfer of wealth upwards. So at the same time that they may not know how to control the inflation or may not want to control the inflation, the money is being redistributed upwards. But again, that goes to maybe control and greed.
Because it's
I
like,
don't know, but if they can,
it's like Eddie said with the CPI, the inflation that we're talking about does not include the inflation from stocks and securities and real estate. So there was inflation, and it was intentional. It just wasn't intentional to go to the CPI, the consumer goods, but it was intentional to go to the stock market.
I just wanted to ask if you could say more about Lenin's theory of transition.
Of transition?
How,
He's a Danny's kind of.
I'm sitting next to him, so I'm feeding off of him.
Well, I have to say, I have to plead ignorance. Now we, in the communist movement, spoke about transitions. I don't know, and Danny, anybody else can help me on this. I'm not aware, although if you had asked me this 20 years ago, I may have said Lenin's theory of transition, but I'm not convinced that he had a theory of transition. And the reason I say that, if you look at the objective conditions of Russia at the time of the Russian Revolution, it was an autocracy. It was anti-democratic. The overthrow of the Tsar was the result of a combination of things, including a war that was ruining the country, starving the people, especially the peasantry, killing their sons, and people massively pointed the finger at the Tsar. So this king, or this Caesar, who everybody thought that all the peasants bowed down to him because he was God's representative on earth along with the church, yada, 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 turned out they weren't that invested in him. And they rose up and he had to abdicate. Almost similarly to what happened, 6 years earlier in China, where this ancient, oh, by the way, parentheses, why I like it less these days, the idea of a civilization state. We were talking, I know that's a big thing with some people, but anyway, so the question, you could say it's a theory of transition. Lenin's question was, how do you get from a bourgeois, ineffective government that would not end the war and therefore could not solve the other social problems affecting the peasantry and workers? How do you get from that to a government of the people? A government of Bolsheviks and others who were truly committed to really not socialism so much as to a democratic dispensation. I don't consider that a theory of transition. We, however, can develop theories of transition. I think a theory of transition is just what it says. How do you get from where we are to where something more broadly democratic? And that's what's on the table for us. That's what's on the table for us. We can call it a theory of transition. We can call it whatever, theory of a new democracy. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, the way that because I agree, well, first of all, everyone said what Joe said and Samir said, I agree, because I usually try to think of it in terms of a crisis.
Yeah.
And so the reason why you kind of can't have just like a static theory of transition is because a crisis can change in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously it's not February 1917 in Tsarist Russia right now, it's 2021, December in America, different things. And something that was brought up is we can say that the ruling class rules, but they don't govern. And this goes back to the discussion you had last week about democracy. Meaning, yes, they are just kind of concerned about preserving their power, and they'll do whatever to try to maintain that. And if it has effects on other people, especially this administration, the Biden administration, I don't want to curse, but
Yeah, I know,
they don't give a about people, really. Like, they really don't, in a way. And so they're like, we're just going to try to maintain, this kind of preservation of our ideological, and good luck everybody else or something like that. And that's why this question of inflation, they're like, we need to get certain parts of the economy back, the ones we care about, and if it spills over into more expensive milk and eggs and gasoline for everybody else, that's your own problem, and you're probably complaining about your white privilege or something like that.
Yeah, right. That's their now.
Because you know what Judith Butler said in 2016? She said, those Trump voters need to get used to losing their privilege. So she used her own really fancy theory to be like, shut up and take it kind of thing. Right? So that's the way that I just approach it is there's a problem, there's a contradiction, and the question is, it doesn't actually resolve, but how do you get people to adapt to the new mode or whatever? And that could just be also apathy. And that's why it comes back to this question that I think Jake was articulating earlier is, how do people maybe adapt to things? There's no point, nihilism.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
But interestingly, the signs are that the majority of American people are not adapting.
Right.
That's the positive thing. I think, you all have to, I feel that we're swimming in really good waters. I mean, when I say we the free school, I don't feel that we're way out in left field or somewhere. We're closer to the people than, you know.
Yeah, well, on that point, about a month ago, there was a poll done by Pew. Well, it was in October, and it said that they were polling Americans, and 85% of Americans polled on the question of the American political system said that either the system needs, quote, to be completely reformed or needs major changes. And then about 66%.
The question is, what's the difference between completely reformed?
I guess it's like a question of transition, as you would say.
Yeah, okay. Transition from completely reformed, from major changes. Okay, I got it. Right. Theory of transition.
And then 66% saw the need for major change or reform in the U.S. economic system. So you have 85% on the political system and 66. I probably if you did it now, a month later, the economic number would probably be even higher with all the inflation. So, I mean, it shows the consciousness of people. And people are very conscious of what's happening.
I think you're very right.
I mean, also, I think this question of transition is interesting also because in a lot of ways, the way we've been talking in free school is about, you know, the global order as a whole has been in a period of crisis or transition. I mean,
Yeah,
for at least 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe going back to the Russian Revolution. The period we're in now, it really feels like those conditions are being accelerated. And that's the kind of situation the elite is, the U.S. elite is facing, especially with what's happening in the world. I mean, the balance of forces is very quickly turning against American, the American world order and the economic system that comes with it, and domestically as well. And also, I mean, this question of.
Can I just say one thing and ask you, you know, because at one point, if you go back a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were talking about we're moving from the unipolar to the multipolar world. Does that adequately explain the shift in the relationship of forces?
That's a good question. I mean, I think we might be very close to being at the multipolar world, if not there. Just the way things are going economically and politically. Like this democracy summit, one of the interesting things that happened is that the White House, I think, invited about 120 countries, and out of those, over 20 declined to attend. It ended up being 80-some that agreed to attend, and they were overwhelmingly in Europe. And a few small island countries, and some countries that don't exist, like Taiwan.
Right.
So, really struggled to get any major country. From Africa, I think only like 2 or 3 countries attended. From the entire Middle East, only
Does South Africa?
it might have been, I'm not sure. But Middle East, there was only 2 countries that attended. And the rest of Asia, also very few countries. So, it shows the fact that the world is telling the American elite they no longer have a monopoly on what democracy means. I mean, that's also what people in China are saying, the Chinese officials, that democracy is not like Coca-Cola. It's not a brand that's owned by the United States, you know. And we can say the same thing about development. We can say the same thing about a lot of issues. And so maybe we need to come up with new language. I don't know if we're between unipolar, multipolar, and new conceptually.
My point was that to talk about unipolar or multipolar is not to address the question of the change in the relationship of forces.
Right.
That the United States is not just now sharing the world with China and Russia and other countries, but the United States is in free fall.
Right, absolutely.
Free fall.
Absolutely.
And it's going to get worse given the political consequences of inflation, which would. Go ahead, Jared. Jared and then.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the funny and ironic thing about the Democracy Summit, or the illuminating thing, is that most Americans either don't know what's happening or literally don't care.
Yeah, right.
Like, I saw that, because it was all virtual, and so they're doing a live stream. It was like 70 people watching the live stream. No one cares about it.
You can't find it.
Yeah.
70 people.
Yeah,
were
like
viewing.
literally 70.
Yeah,
Like
that's
the
a
UN got
beautiful
more
thing.
views than
Right.
The UN itself is pretty boring. And yeah, I don't know. I just feel like whether there's a lot of actually similar, or like it's kind of like the same dynamic where it's whether it's inflation or the crime thing. It's like it's almost like the elites. They just need to. It's almost like the thing that they need to do is reassure themselves. You know, I feel like that's also what Biden's doing. It's not even for the American people. It's so that the ruling class can reassure themselves of like, oh yeah, at least like some people still look to the U.S. and we can still basically like drum up all these people who will be on their side. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like how can you just lie so blatantly? Like, oh no, like Biden was like, yeah, inflation's not falling as quickly as we'd like, and literally inflation is rising at the highest rate that it's risen in like half a century, you know. And also for someone like Krasner to be like, yeah, like we don't have a crime problem, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it also reminded me of the debate with Glenn Greenwald and Judith Butler and Cornel West, where it really felt like especially Judith Butler, like it didn't really seem like she had thoughts going through her mind. You know, like it was almost like she was kind of just like a generator of things that, you know, people say in academia. Like you have no real thoughts going on. And Cornel West, like I feel like it's slightly different, but also it's similar in that people just nowadays I feel like people just kind of tune into Cornel West because they want to hear Cornel West say Cornel West things. You know?
Yeah.
And yeah, and really this thing about like the question of journalism, like Julian Assange, but also the intellectual, like the role of those types of institutions should be to like reveal reality to people, and instead the whole the mode of operation is actually just to either obscure or to just conceal and to basically see what you can get away with. But yeah, I don't know. It was just pretty funny that, and also very telling of I guess where we are, that like literally none of the American people care about like basically presenting America as, you know, like the model of democracy. And it was interesting because I still watch Tucker Carlson sometimes, and he had a really interesting segment a few weeks ago where, like, I guess it is true that you can't really say that America is exactly the same as like what Russia was before like the October Revolution. But even he was like, you know, like he was basically saying that the U.S. ruling class, like the Biden administration, are basically like the Romanovs in Russia. Yeah, and he also said that he compared them to Batista in Cuba.
Oh wow.
And, but basically he's saying like that, like, he's saying that like, for all that these ruling elites try to do, there's still the element in which, yeah, like they're caught off guard. Like they're caught off guard by their own people, and they haven't really fully understood like how their own people feel about their rule and stuff, which, yeah, I thought was really interesting.
I think, if I could just, I don't mean to, you know, it's almost like the ruling class is fighting the last war. In other words, the last war domestically was to put down the black struggle.
Right.
So they were always preparing for another black uprising, you know, and here it comes from white people. And the police are not trained psychologically to brutalize and kill white people. The ruling class has no answer to a white uprising, and it is an uprising. So it's like they're fighting the last war and they're so unprepared for this. And they, if I could just say one last thing, you see, in their minds, quote unquote, you know, it is, and I'll put it this way, the race question that that the ruling class has to deal with. But they never thought that it would be the class question and the race question. See, they've trumped us on the race question with all this, you know, BS, as you know. But here, the class question, that's the political significance of inflation. Because it has a way of uniting all working people. I'm sorry, but go ahead, Emil.
I really like the analogy that you're using of the
story of the emperor has no clothes. And I think this really ties in, I think, what Jeremiah has been talking about, this debate, which I did watch this debate between
You watched it?
and Cornel West and Judith Butler. I can't remember the name of the fourth fellow who was
Glenn Greenwald.
Simon Critchley was
the moderator, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, a lot of these ideas that these intellectuals have been thinking about, they're all very true, and there's a lot to be said about them. But when they're talking about things that ring hollow to most people, that's where there's that immense disconnect. Like I think of the story, the emperor has no clothes. Like you could say, if you want to believe the emperor has clothes, that he's wearing a million different things, and how shiny and beautiful each different linen and pair of jeans he has on, whatever you want to say. Most people see a naked man out there.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, this identity politics thing is in many ways the United States saying, okay, we have solved democracy. We have solved all of the social issues. Now we can move to the individual plane. Most of the rest of the world sees it for what it is. You solved democracy? Really? That's why you have Julian Assange being tortured in prison? That's why you have to go all over the world bombing everyone because you solved democracy?
Right.
Well, you know, most people in the rest of the world see it as what it is. And an interesting point in that conversation that really struck me was a moment where Cornel West was talking in many ways, in beautiful ways, about how the joy of struggle, and he was using a lot of socialistic ideas. But he had to couch it immediately. He said, well, I'm not talking about Bolshevism. Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about
Oh, he
Bolshevism.
said that?
Yes, that's what he said. And immediately Judith Butler sat back in her seat, got calmed down a little bit. We're not going to talk about any idea that is representative of over 2/3 of the population of the entire planet. It's that, and you can't talk about that. You can't talk about that. But we'll have this idea that we have democracy.
Can I ask you, just say that one? He said, I'm talking about not Bolshevism. He actually
I'm
said.
trying to remember exactly the ideas he was talking about in that moment, but what really struck me is he was talking about, you know, thinking in more communal ways, in a more balanced economy, but don't get me wrong, I mean, I have to go back and look at it, but at one point he said, don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not talking about Bolshevism. Don't get worried, I'm not going to bring up the boogeyman that we can't ever talk about. And that's, again, well, Henry Winston, one thing that struck me was he said, he put it in this language, he was speaking about the fascistic threat that Germany and Italy and the United States pose to the rest of the world. And he said, this is the consequences of anti-communism. This is the genocidal consequences of anti-communism. And so what ties these two? I mean, I like Glenn Greenwald, I like Cornel West. I even like some of the things Judith Butler was saying, you know, in her world that doesn't exist. But you know, they all are tied up in this anti-communist idea, and that is why they're acceptable for us to think of as leaders of intellect.
Can I just say one thing? Because the assumption, and they always, is that communists are against democracy.
Yeah.
And Winston has, the communists are the best fighters for democracy. That's empirically provable. It's empirically provable. Communists have never limited democracy. Now, if you want to get in, you know, there's, oh God, I'm sorry.
Well, they limited what our liberal understanding of democracy
Absolutely.
is, which is you can't use money to dictate what the rules are.
Absolutely.
So
That's
in
it.
that way, they're limiting
That's right.
democracy.
And the hypocrisy of bourgeois democracy. You know, I got the right to vote, so that means I'm free.
Yeah. I have the right to give as much money as I want to the candidates and structure and everything else.
My favorite moment from the debate was when I think Judith Butler started by being like, you know, I can't help but notice that there's not a black woman on this panel. And then Glenn Greenwald was like, hey, so would you like to have Kamala Harris on this panel? And she's like, no, that's not what I meant. I meant like a black feminist, like whatever.
Kamala's a feminist.
Yeah. All her staff is quitting nowadays.
Yeah.
You'll be at
Calling
at
her
the
a boss from hell and stuff.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about what you were talking about, Doc, with Jacob's comment. Are people, you know, like
Have nothing to lose.
have nothing to do with what I'm saying. Also, like, have a purpose to have faith in democracy in this country,
Yeah.
or not. And it seems like, you know, we talked about this dynamic of the ruling class having this nihilism because of the crisis. You know, there's like, okay, now that Trump is here, like, everything is bad, or I don't know, some stuff that we've been talking about for a little while. I guess about how, like, the ruling class has found, or not the, I'm trying to say, like, just theories, found itself, like, the ruling class has failed, there's some things missing, I'm not quite sure of all, like, but specifically, but it's interesting about this point of communism, and I was thinking, like, Winston is so right, Winston is so needed, you know, I guess I hear you, Doc, about how it is true. People want this country, you know, to be a true democracy. And I do believe that people have faith, not exactly in the government, but just like for like this country to be something. But it is also like this development. Though the ruling class is like in its crisis, young people, like, what is the purpose? What is it that, and you know, all this violence, all this, you know, it's like a lot of despair, drugs, you know, and that's an important point of what you said, Doc, about the family. You know what I'm saying? Just because your family's bad doesn't mean that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to submit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, it seems like Jacob's question is like, why? Why is there that? Why is this still?
That's the question.
And then there's the question of leadership that we talked about with King, and like, how do you
That's right.
deal with that after like crack and then prison? But you know, this thing about communism is like, and this is why I go back to like, well, the political education of the people is the imperative, because, well, it's not like we have to be anti-democratic, you know, the values that we hold that are specifically American, to, you know, understand communism or like, you know, accept it. But like, that synthesis also has to happen with political education. Understanding Winston, that devote, and Lenin kind of framing. But, you know, so it's like, I hear what you're saying, there is that reality of this thing. But I also think it's interesting because of how, you know, people, like you're saying, Jeremiah, did not watch Democracy
Summit.
But, you know, so like people,
80 people attending, I had 70 people watching.
Say that again.
There were 80 countries attending, I had 70 people watching.
Yeah, right. Is that true though, or is that just in America or worldwide?
I heard something like that.
You heard that joke? It's a beautiful thing.
and it's like different stuff, like either in social media or whatever, that, like RT, like Dick was showing me how, like, you know, there's like different stuff about, that expresses a worldview that looks at Russia or like China, and it's just like there's a lot of reason to diss America. It's like, you know, Americans aren't doing from Americans. So it's like, okay, how can this force potential, you know, be
That's
used?
right. That's the question. That is the question.
And well,
See, isn't it this is what Johan was pointing out with the data,
yeah.
that up into the 60s and 80% of the people say that this democracy has to be radically changed and so on and so forth. And here's the president of this democracy lecturing the world on what democracy is. You know, you said he has no political or moral basis to even open his mouth. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I wasn't. It wasn't nothing like that. But it's just like, it's like, well, true, black people can be anti-communist. Like,
No.
you know, they can't keep
That's
holding
right.
on to stuff.
The least anti-communists in the population because of their deeper acuteness of the struggle for democracy. We've always known that.
And peace.
And peace.
And
And
that's
peace.
the thing.
Absolutely.
Peace,
Absolutely.
Peace with your brother. Peace with your son.
That's right.
And peace with
That's
brother.
right.
That's where you get to the
And could
idealism.
always see a similarity between themselves and other darker people.
Yeah.
Could always see that. And therefore, they couldn't, swallow the whole line, hook, line, and sinker.
And I still believe without that force, without black people, China needs that too.
Absolutely.
Russia needs this.
I think you're right.
All that.
I think you're right. And I'm just in conversation with you. One of the and I was thinking about this apropos your point, because how do you explain what we have discovered is such a rich body of thinking that is Winston's book? Seem not to be on the radar. Explain these, quote, scholars of the left.
Right. Doesn't
And they don't talk about Winston, they don't talk about, what is it? You know what I think it is, Sarah? That he was so forthright in attacking anti-communism.
And that's the thing. The other thing I was thinking about, also kind of like this week, was the organic thinker. You know what I'm saying? Like, when was it like?
Yep.
That's black people. That's working people, regardless. You know, like.
And he showed the working person, the black person, that you can be an intellectual. You don't have to wait upon nobody with a PhD.
No.
That's what
And that's
Winston
the same thing
shows.
with this city. If you take down public education,
Yes.
if you take down all the things that kids need, like you already had mentioned, like what has emerged is like this kind of sense, this crisis thing. And I'm coming back to the organic thing because I know that there's still the potential for people to think right now.
You say there is.
There is,
That's
just
right.
because, just because, not any but I think that that's important too, because we don't have to believe what the white man tells us. I don't have to be told what to do or nothing like that. So, it's just like, what is morally right? And I think that's kind of what we have to go with right now. And it's difficult to see that because there's a lot of stuff happening within the black community. But there's still a sense of truth. There's still the fact that there is truth out here. And it is wrong to kill XYZ. It is wrong to drug even your white neighbor, even though he's white and you should be mad at him.
That's right.
Or whatever. But it's still the same thing. It comes back to that point for me about truth, because I know or at least from the bus driver who expresses to me yesterday, he was like, "Oh, why do you read all the time? I always see you on the bus reading." I'm like, "Well, I'm reading this book about the International Meeting of Communists and Workers in 1969." And he started talking to me about some anti-communist South African professor that he had met way back, and then advocated for something about Nelson Mandela and stuff. I was like, no, watch the Winnie Mandela documentary. She was the basis of Nelson Mandela's movement. She's what kept, that kind of thing. And so we had that conversation, but it's like, I know people out here think about these questions, which is war and peace questions. You know what I'm saying? How does imperialism actually affect the working person? And is it wrong or is it right? So. about that organic thinker because I know that the universities, that's what I'm thinking. Like, because there's also because I've been hanging with the musicians. Everyone, that's true. Coming from Berkeley, Temple, all that, but it's like you have skill, but where is the impetus for what it is that you're doing? And artists have to come to that question and really kind of think about the responsibility, of what it is that who they are in society. And that's the same thing goes with everybody else, but yeah. I'm not talking about, okay, let's play blues music. I'm saying like, okay, let's get down to struggle, let's get down close to the people. I understand what we need right now,
Could I ask maybe that we transition into the discussion of all the groups in the free school? And would it be all right if we started with W.E.B. Du Bois Baldwin, and then we go to, and then we go to,
The Indian groups.
Raju, and then we go to MIT, and then we then we go to Sophie and Nathan, and then we circle back to Bandung, Lotus. We do it that way?
Viet Lao.
Oh, Viet Lao. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let me say something. Why don't we do Viet Lao after we do W.E.B. Du Bois Baldwin? So go ahead. Whoever's going to start with W.E.B. Du Bois.
Sure. So thank you for having us again. Today we're going to describe the development of Henry Winston, of the Henry Winston Project. And tonight we rehashed it, so I'll keep it short. Serafina found Henry Winston. How? The world doesn't, may never know. No, I don't remember how you came to it, but
Reddit class.
oh, but no, how you came back to it in that context, or February. Yeah. So, but over the course of the last 9 months, we've been reading Henry Winston and reflecting then. Yeah, I know. It's been almost a year of us studying Henry Winston. And I feel that one of the big takeaways from Henry Winston was that he helped us, I forgot how I put it yesterday, but he helped us deal with this question that I thought, or the one I think the free school is trying to attempt to deal with, is how can the free school's ideological framework mold the American essence into what it's supposed to be, that of freedom, democracy, and peace. And I feel that Henry Winston does this through, I think he plays a tremendous role as a revolutionary through being able to describe, because his goal is unity. So what he does through his critique and through his investigation of the ruling class is he describes how the ruling class is dividing you. And so in Class, Race, and Black Liberation, we have different questions we'll kind of get to. But in Class, Race, and Black Liberation, I'd actually like to just name a couple chapters and say how they were important to the development, because we had gone through it perhaps too quickly. But what Henry Winston, he looks at the race question, and he looks at the different ideological questions that the ruling class is imposing on people. This was especially profound for me on a personal level because of the Moynihan Doctrine. The idea that it's the fault of the black family that black people are being exploited, that they're in the conditions that they're in, which you just say it like that, it doesn't make any more sense. And I feel that feel that this is incredibly. This is why I say that I leave that question like how to mold the American essence, and I'm trying to find a better way to articulate that, or so like put that more concrete. But because he is able to able to challenge the basis out of which people are carrying out political struggle. People are carrying out political struggle ideologically by saying like, oh well, that's on the family. The family structure has to be better. There's no black fathers in the house. All the black fathers are gone. And that's how they're thinking about a political struggle because they're trying to deal with this question of gun violence, or they're trying to deal with this question of education. Okay, well the father's not there to tell the son or the whoever to go to school. That's the problem, and not the fact that the father was taken out of the house, that the guns are placed in the neighborhood, that the cocaine and the crack is placed in the neighborhood, that the houses are going to be gentrified, that K&A exists and exists to devalue that area so that gentrification can happen, so on, yada yada yada. It's the black father, it's the black family. Thank you. And so there's different. Thank you. There's different things he kind of brings to the table, and I think I would like to read or just state maybe two more chapters that I'd like to kind of just look at, and then we can kind of go to the process project or whatever. And so the one is the ethnicity, Monopoly's racist strategy. I like this chapter a lot. It was very short. It was like 4 or 5 pages. But I thought it was just like boom, because in the ethnicity strategy, or Monopoly's racist strategy, what it does, and he puts it pretty clear, it raises one group of people up, incentivizes that group of people so as to pit, the different peoples that the monopoly is exploiting against each other. So for example, they would, let's say, like, Monopoly would raise up Northern Ireland to pit Northern Ireland against Ireland. You know what I mean? But this comes out today in identity politics. Let's put up the queer, black queer, X, Y, and Z, and then the quote racists are against the queer movement, against the and then Monopoly gets away with every crime it's ever committed. All the war crimes in the name of humanitarianism. And so, I mean, and this also deals with this American essence that we're kind of at each other's. We move toward being at each other's throats first, before dealing with the conditions that are in front of us. Before questioning, like, okay, well, why is this happening in the first place? Like, why am I against you? It happened yesterday to me at work. Like, me and my coworker are arguing, but we're both, first of all, being exploited, and they're both keeping us later than we need to be. Well, the other thing, the other chapter that I would like to, there's a lot of good in this. Henry Winston was dropping gems, yeah, right, but the other chapter is the nature of the white and black relationship. I think one of these two chapters are the fallacy of the internal colony. The idea there being that the white population is ultimately the exactly classless, without, and all white people are ultimately the enemy. This is precisely the problem. Black people cannot progress. What Henry Winston, this is the important thing that Henry Winston teaches.
I want to get to the W.E.B. Du Bois, how this all relates to you all.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
But no, I mean, this relates to us because it's giving us, like I said last week, I think the Henry Winston Project sets an ideological precedent for us. And it sets an ideological precedent for us because it's giving us new ways of struggle. And I think, Serafina had said to me that, Henry Winston moved us in a direction, kind of paraphrase, moved us in a direction that, and pushed us toward something where, I don't want to say Du Bois wasn't, but in a way that was much more present, like we could critique Black Lives Matter. And I feel that the reading group grew in terms of its ability to struggle ideologically and to move people closer to the Saturday Free School through ideas like the nature of the white-black relationship or through ethnicity. And so I think ultimately, in that way,
The concept of synthesis.
synthesis.
This is very important, I would say.
Yeah, so Winston's ideas helped us to interrogate the movements of our time and gave us a way to critique those that we didn't, I think we really didn't have before. But not only his ideas, but the way he developed his ideas and his character, the example of his life, were also, I think, very important to the development of what we wanted to show with the Winston Symposium. And the quote that I come back to, I haven't been with it that long, just a couple months, I guess, but we drink from the fountain of knowledge from whatever source. We do that for the natural sciences, why not for the social sciences? That has been pivotal for me in how I think and how I talk to people about ideas. And just as an example, my brother and I don't always see politically eye to eye, but I invited him to the symposium and he came to that first time. And I was so glad to see him hear Winston and to get to talk to him about those ideas. And I'm still thinking about what we talked about as we were walking back to the bus after that. And that quote is so pivotal. That way to approach ideas and people is so important because it's very easy to see someone you disagree with and to say, I can't learn from anything they have to say. Or see someone you agree with and say, they can say they're wrong. But what Winston says and the way he developed his ideas is this beautiful synthesis. It's very dialectical, I think, where you can talk to a Trump voter, you can watch Tucker Carlson and say, you can understand them and say this, you can evaluate what they're saying for truth and then incorporate that truth into a greater understanding of the world and the people. And this, on a very personal level, I think that's been a huge development from Winston.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just want to reiterate the 2 points that you guys have made, which is just how critical his ideas, his organic ideas were, and his humanness, which I think is ultimately connected to those ideas. I felt like as I read his work and studied his life, I saw the spirit of a life that's dedicated to the child.
Dedicated
To the child.
the child.
The immortal child, the future of humanity. This idea of principled unity, the importance and the centrality of principled unity. It's interesting because growing up, I was always taught that you need to compromise. Compromise is the most important thing, and to Blaze's point, we need to be able to hear and learn from people we may disagree with on certain things, but there is an essence we need to agree on. If we don't have that, whatever unity we have is not going to be very substantial and not long lasting. Just this making difficult compromises, but holding firm ideological lines.
Synthesis is not capitulation.
Yeah.
Right.
Say that one more time, synthesis?
Synthesis is not capitulation.
Yes.
Yeah. Seeing things in their totality. This idea of separating the sin from the sinner is an idea I get from his work, although he doesn't say that explicitly, but it's just taking the ideas and remembering that people are people. The violence that's perpetuated by an extreme right-wing person who's in an impoverished situation. I mean, that's a desperate person. That's not someone who's using their full capacities as a human being. And so we shouldn't condemn any particular marginalized group of society this way. Just being deeply engaged with the ideas of our time and not taking any particular idea on its face value. history art, I feel like he had sort of an endless hope for people at the same time. As critical as he was of the ideas, he really, I mean, just the way he organized and went about his life really spoke to a deeper sense of hope for humanity. I don't think he lived the life the way he did, and without that part of your psyche. And one thing I keep coming back to in my mind as I was doing the work was, why is it that I have to do this? Why me? Why? It's a lot of more easier ways I could be spending my time, and why is no one else doing this? It was a struggle, and it humbled me in many ways. But the more I did, the more the other question, the reverse of that is, why does this need to be done? And in this way, I kind of changed the way I was thinking from an exclusive, selfish way to a more inclusive version of myself. Is that self attached to this, rooted to this larger historical thing that we call humanity. And I mean, that's another reason I'm glad to be taught by you. I mean, you learned from him, he learned from Du Bois and others, and there's this importance of having a root that so much of the thought today is really pretending like you can get an idea that's rootless or in a vacuum. Everything comes from somewhere. That's another thing I think is really, really essential that I feel like Henry really harped on as well. And all of this really ties into what it means to be humble, what it means to be, because I am a human being just like everyone else. And ultimately it's that perspective that connects us. It's not like some theoretical thing that Stalin or Trotsky or whoever said. It's the humanness that just beams out of the language that Henry uses. And I was happy to have my uncle showed up. I told him about it last minute. He came for 2 days, which was great. My mom came, which I was happy to see. My wife and her little brother came. He was in high school. He's now reading the Ibram Kendi book for a second time.
Oh, no.
He wasn't really a fan of it the first time. Neither was apparently all his classmates were big fans of it. So this is a good thing to hear. The fact that I have to read it again is an interesting thing. But he had some interesting questions. He talked to Catherine Blunt a lot. It was nice to see. He asked me, like, one question he asked was, how do you know if a movement or an uprising is revolutionary? I said, well, what are the ideas? What is the theory that they're coming towards? Are they revolutionary? I feel like he definitely had different ideas, and I feel like in many ways a lot of this was able to get through in this world that he lives in, which is apparently Ibram Kendi and whatever else he can get from outside of school. But I'm glad we were able to give that to whoever we could.
So if you want to say something. We'll come back though. Is it all right if we go to Viet Lao Khmer?
Yeah, sure.
Just tell us what it is again,
Yeah.
how it was formed.
It came about in discussion between myself and Brandon.
Tell everybody what it is again.
Oh, Viet Lao Khmer. It's we study the common heritage between Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, and the anti-colonial movement and the liberation struggles that kind of came out of the people there. I mean, mostly out of the conversations that I've had with Brandon, and then later, Chanda and my sister, about this sort of state of young people living in the diaspora, Asian Americans, and how separated, how alienated they are from like this strong history, this strong tradition that they're only a generation, if that, apart from. And it's at their peril. It's at our generation's peril to be distant from that. And so after a lot of conversation, we wanted to kind of embark on this project, which exists, on social media, where we can reach sort of younger people to learn about like the leaders, the revolutionary leaders, what they were writing, how their partnerships function, but also I think a big kind of sticking point was like the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot, and like how absolutely confusing that is for like academics or like people steeped in history like that. And so young people, I think, are immersed in like this kind of ruling class understanding of their history, where they just don't see themselves as a part of it, right? And then if you know that befalls you, then you can submerge yourself in whiteness and basically become a pawn to the Western kind of worldview. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it is motivated by like our interactions with young people in Philadelphia, young Asians, young Vietnamese, Cambodians, and Lao people. And I think in our readings, we're reading a lot of journalists, we're reading a lot of historical narratives at the time, and I guess when you brought up Julian Assange, it reminded me a lot about this journalist we're reading, Wilfred Burchett, and the journalists that came out of China, that came out of Korea, and the principled nature of like an institution like journalism as one of seeking the truth, not just stating the facts as you see them, but also like uncovering the truth of the matter. And Wilfred Burchett, in like the sort of lineage of Julian Assange, suffered very deeply.
And they're both Australians.
They are. That's right. They are both Australian.
Julian Assange said that Wilfred Burchett is his role model.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can see very clearly the connection between Assange, between Burchett. I mean, Burchett lost his citizenship. He was public enemy number 1 of Australia. And he had to find his second home, which he loved dearly, very dearly, in Vietnam, among the liberation fighters. And yeah, I mean, that kind of plays into like our understanding of history, because if our truth tellers are like ostracized in that way, then the narrative becomes one of the ruling class. And so, thinking a lot about the once noble institution of journalism, in relaying this, it's very important. And I come from a communications background, so it's like I think about it a lot. And then finally, I guess I can talk to the choice of young people between like the Western worldview and a rising East, a rising Asia, and a rising Africa, and seeing like making that choice to see yourself among that movement that came out of it produced you, it produced the diaspora, and instilling a pride essentially to know figures like Sukarno or Ho Chi Minh or Suphanavong, Phomavivane, like these are Laotian, Cambodian leaders, Indonesian leaders that held principled views, made very difficult decisions at the time. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess we do ourselves a disservice by distancing ourselves from these traditions, and then also like within the vein of free school, like tying ourselves to the Black radical tradition with Du Bois, with Baldwin, whose like writings on peace essentially like tied itself very very clearly to the national liberation struggles. So yeah, Reevaluating is maybe just under a year old, or maybe just about a year old. We produce information online on these things that we're talking about, the readings that we're reading, poetry. We're just like arts and culture of the continent of Asia, and to try to reach the young people in Philadelphia, but also abroad, maintain relationships to some other organizations, and it's also like a little difficult because we're finding ourselves butting heads with other organizations that seem to take offense at things that we talk about. And, like that's the whole cancel culture stuff, which doesn't really bug me anymore, but it used to, but not now, because I know how important this work is, and how important principle is. So, yeah, it's a
Could I
wonderful
ask you,
project. Yeah, go
could
ahead.
you, I know there's an event between Vietnam, Khmer, and Van Dung coming up. Could you tell us a little bit about it? And
Sure. Yeah. It's this collaboration we have with the Van Dung Reading Group. In late January on the struggles in Vietnam and Korea, and the sort of the similarities and differences and the lessons that came out of those struggles. And you know, there are significant populations of both in Philadelphia and in the diaspora, and it's like the same kind of conversations that we've both been having between our two groups. What is the destiny of Asian America, and what choices does Asians in America have? And so it's very exciting collaboration, and yeah, it's going to be continuing that same vein of the Winston Symposium, of the China Symposium.
Can I just say something about, just to bring everybody
Yeah,
up to
go
date about our meeting on Thursday. I think, this collaboration, am I pronouncing Viet-Lao?
Khmer.
Khmer.
Yeah.
Why Khmer, not Khmer?
That's just the way the Cambodians pronounce it.
Oh, really?
The
Okay.
Vietnamese peoples are Viet, Lao is Lao.
That's so interesting. Yeah. It's a very poetic name, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I know,
It
right?
really is
I
nice,
think
man.
it was Chanda or Brandon, maybe between the two of them.
Very nice,
Yeah.
very nice. But, as you said, using the model of the Winston and China events, and, one of the things we were talking about is the connection to people like Reverend Lee, Helen Gim, and engaging them in this larger discussion of peace and democracy, and, as you put it, the Asian American. Where does the Asian American fit in, given the diaspora and the anti-colonial struggles and all that type of thing, which is very radicalizing. So I just wanted to tell everybody about that, because, and you say it's for the end of January?
Yes.
Okay, you think you got enough time?
I think so.
Because, we really do, I know, it's,
No.
Is it gonna be here?
Don't
Obviously.
think so. Yeah, we'll figure out the details.
Sorry, I don't know if I asked the wrong question.
No.
Fine. I just wanted to say that, to do all the political work, and it's very important, reaching out to these different political and religious leaders in the city. And of course, we talked about a dialogue, Afro-America, Asian dialogue on democracy and peace and yada, yada, yada. Catherine Blunt, Mahdi Ibn Zayed, you know what I'm saying? So all of that, I just wanted to say that this is a very interesting and creative collaboration going forward.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to say anything?
Well, just that I think it's been really important and I think enlightening for our two groups to work together, because we also come from, even though we're all primarily Asian, we come from different lives, and
Definitely.
and I think we really did, now you put it on, I think we pulled a lot from the Winston event in particular, because I think coming from the Winston event and at Free School, and also because of you, Doc, I think a big pillar of the event now is this idea of, is the Asian in America who is now being tapped to be a big leader of woke culture and woke America. Are we going to be pawns of the American war agenda? Or are we going to learn from the lessons of the Korean War, the Vietnam War, what it has done to Asian peoples, but also what it has done to the US? Are we going to let America continue its war agenda, Afghanistan, Palestine, or are Asians going to actually play the revolutionary role that is our heritage? And you're the one who pioneered this, Doc, but basically in Asia they have a real opportunity to complete their anti-colonial struggles And just like Du Bois predicted, pendulum towards Asia, like they have a real opportunity to complete people's democracy. And there's so much opportunity in America, and I think you see it a lot in our reading groups, how like all our little groups are all like working towards this idea of what will America's democracy, like people's democracy look like? Will we be able to like struggle for people's democracy?
Yeah, the one thing that even something that I thought about from what your group was talking about, and specifically Emil, when you were saying like you had to make that switch from saying like why am I supposed to do this event? Like why does that be me? Instead saying like what will happen? Like why do these like events, but also like these kinds of political and ideological efforts that we're doing, like why do they need to be made? I don't know if you were pulling it from King, but King has that sermon where he's like he's talking about like the Jericho Road, and he's saying instead of asking what will happen to me if I help this man on the side of the road, instead you have to ask what will happen to this man if I don't help. And I think that's also, in a way, that's the question that we're trying, or we're hoping that Asians in this country can start to ask that question. What will happen to this country if we don't bring into it and inject that kind of spirit which we can inherit from
See, that's
our
the question
tradition?
with Helen. Remember we talked about his tactic to approach Helen.
Yeah.
I think you just framed it, Jerry.
Helen
Ginn.
Oh, okay.
Helen Ginn, Councilwoman Helen Ginn. You know, and Reverend Lee, of course, too. You know, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, but that's the formulation. That is it right there. What will happen to the country if Asians abstain? Given, as you say, the history, the anti-colonial history, the democratic striving that comes from, you know, you all are here, but you also have a heritage. It's very, I think that works. Because, you know, we were thinking, because it's all, you know, it's political. How do you approach, you know, these very important public figures? I think you just, okay, should we move to Sophie and Nathan?
Yeah, I think this relates
Speak
a
up,
lot.
so.
I think this relates a lot to, especially your introduction this morning about the lack of a broad education, and also Sarah, what you were talking about. Like, the young person has nowhere to turn right now for genuine leadership and a genuine outlet of political expression. And so the last few weeks, Nathan and I have been talking about how we came into the free school and this work pretty early in our lives, and we still have at least 2 more years in universities, and that it's been hard to connect with other students and share these ideas in an organic way, and to have that mutual trust between us and other students. And yet we see that there's a real need for it, and that there is potential among students, but the best that they have is, like you said, these groups that are ultimately arms of nonprofits like Police Free Pen and other groups that, you know, they try to do something real, they try to get to the community, but they just can't because they don't have the fundamentals straight. They look to people like Rick Kajewski and these other agents in the city, but we've been trying to.
Can I ask a question? Now, your group is specifically focused on students, is that? Okay,
Yes.
now I understand.
Yeah.
That's,
Because the way that Lotus has evolved, we've realized that bringing students into it now would not be politically correct, and it also would just be immensely difficult. So we're asking the question of what ideas and issues are on students' minds right now, because we know they're thinking, it's impossible to be in Philadelphia and not think of the immense contradictions in the city. What does it mean to to be at Penn in this center of safety while like around you black people are dying, people are being pushed out of their homes. People are asking these questions, but like what is actually to be done here? What is the young person's role in the city? And we think it's really important that students have an alternative place to discuss these ideas. Yeah, so we're trying to build something organic and welcoming to students across Philadelphia, Penn, Temple, CCP, Council, including like what groups exist on these other campuses that like we could build with. Nathan, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. Kind of like what you were saying, Sophie. I mean, like the university has like a lot of potential, but a lot of that is like wasted. Like you could have the engineering students; they could become, you know, the war makers. You know, you have the people that want to make like a genuine change, but then they could become like an arm of like the nonprofits or something. And so, just kind of like trying to make, how you say, I guess like an ideological break from like the university to understand like what is it that I can do like as a young person with a stake, or I guess to even understand that you have a stake, like say in Philadelphia or in the world, and that like the choices that you make right now do have significance. So yeah, just to kind of break, because like students are really funneled, I think, into many things that like end up being selfish. Like if you want to go into activism, you have your groups here. If you want to, I don't know, do something else, but there's no real like space yet to really discuss the fundamental questions of like why even are you going to university? What even are you trying to accomplish? Yeah.
This is very, I know, if I could just say, I know Michelle had brought this up, this idea of the immense potential among students at the University of Pennsylvania, and I would say also Temple. But there is, as you said, no place for them to seriously reflect upon and discuss, you know, what is happening to them and why they're in the university, and, you know, what they, like you say, what is their purpose in life? What is their moral grounding? I think this is huge.
Yeah, and it's been on our minds for a long time how to reach students because they're our peers, but in a time when there isn't like a principled issue that students can unite around, and the consciousness is really low. There's a lot of competing distractions, but
Competing distraction.
you know, like, but then the other side where students are so depressed because they're literally dying for something to give their lives to and they just don't know what it is. And us also sympathizing with that, and admitting that we don't know what the most powerful student movement would look like right now, or what this group will turn into, and earnestly being like to other students, what are you thinking about? I think it has a lot of potential and it's really important, but it is, the details are really hard to work out.
If you don't mind, I'd like to work with you all. We could do it over Zoom. I have some ideas since it was raised, you know, Michelle, I mean, maybe the four of us could do a Zoom. And each campus is very different. I think Temple, which we need to talk about. I know Du Bois, Baldwin, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, y'all started, and you know, but it was very difficult to get traction at Temple. You know what I'm saying? The ideological conditions are very unique to Temple, given the way the African American Studies Department is configured and all of that. But go, I'm sorry.
No, I just want to add I would say that it's a different, at least in advertising. Okay, well, like, I don't know what angle it is that you guys are going at it, but from what I'm hearing about it, in terms of being, okay, students can come and think. But that's different than being like, okay, we're a black organization doing X.
Absolutely.
Because at Temple, there's all that Africology stuff
That's right, that's
to
right.
it. So I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah.
We should talk about this because I have some ideas, having been on these campuses, and how and you guys are right, the administrations are now determining what students do, even to be, quote, radical. It's not organic from the bottom. It's not students. It's the administration and, quote, the radical professors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it F's everything up, believe me. So it's not a student, and you all are very right about what you're saying. Go ahead, Michelle, and then Samir.
No, I was just saying that I like the way you guys describe it as basically this task of clearing away a lot of the distractions, you know, on these campuses and especially Penn, so that coming back to what you were saying, Cynthia and Doc too, you know, an organic intellect can be built again from people, because it's very true that this iteration or this branch of Lotus, it's dealing with a different set of students and a different set of questions from when we first started 2.5 years ago. And I mean, the way I see this is that you guys are opening up a space that's desperately needed in a place that is so ideologically confused and cluttered, just so people can, you know, like build out that intuition and who they are, and you know, develop an organic intellect again. It's so, I guess, like I just wanted to make that point about space. That's the way that I think a lot about our work. You know, putting space back where it's needed, so that people can come back to an organic way of questioning, an organic way of evaluating themselves and their lives. And if they can just have that space, I think the truth has a natural way of coming back out, instead of, you know, all of the paradigms and assumptions of you know, the ruling class agenda being put onto people.
I would just disagree with one thing you said, Michelle, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I don't think Penn is at all ideologically confused.
That's what I thought too.
No, I mean,
at the level it keeps students off balance.
right.
But it's
But-
on purpose.
Yeah, but it's purposeful. It's purposeful. The
Well,
okay, I'm sorry.
yeah, well, I should clarify Penn is comprised by the consciousness of the students, you know, in that sense. The minds of people are very confused.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think it's a very conflicted student body.
Huh.
And I think especially early on in the first and second years, there's a lot of teetering and back and forth in the consciousness of students as they determine, you know, what path they're going to follow. And like, you're pushed and pulled in so many directions. There's a whole host of factors. I think it's very chaotic. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Samir.
I was just gonna agree with Michelle about the space, because one of those critical things the reading groups do, and it's a lot of effort, is to get everyone in one room to read together. And I know that's hard, and like at Temple, space is always hard to come by
Yeah.
for some reason.
For some reason. Yeah, with all that space. Yeah.
And you know, that's why the Church of the Advocate is pretty great, because it's a public space for people to have events. And then I was gonna say, one of the differences I think between Temple and Penn is Temple is trying to change its identity from a commuter school, a school for North Philadelphia, into a Southern sports school, which doesn't make sense. And so they changed their demographic from black and Jewish to white and Jersey and New York and Lancaster and Bucks County. And so that's one of the differences. I think that's why it's different at Temple. It's because
I don't know how different it is between Drexel, UPenn,
it's different.
but then there's CCP, Temple, the art schools,
Yeah.
and
University of Science.
St. Joe's.
St. Joe's.
Yeah,
There's
they're
a
all
lot-
over the place.
No, that's
It's
interesting
a
though.
beautiful thing about Philly.
Yeah, well,
Students having so many people studying in a city. is beautiful.
Yeah, well, because education is a profit-making industry,
Yeah.
and it's not about the students.
Right.
So these universities can proliferate, and they're exploiting students in so many ways. I agree with you.
Well, I was
And to keep them paying customers as long as you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this also reminded me of something that Sophie had brought up in conversation, I think this week or last week, which is about how in the autobiography of Father Paul Washington, he talks about how Penn students, like anti-war Penn students, would regularly meet at the Church of the Advocate. And I was thinking about how there's this tradition of students who identify as Penn students but interact with the city in a principled manner. And I also thought of how Lily herself was a Penn student. She chose to go to North Philadelphia. She was going between the two, when she first came up to the village. But now, the consciousness of students is such that it's either they're Penn students or they shed that identity entirely because they're so ashamed and they become a Philadelphian. Like you go up to Kensington, you join PSL, but you don't want anyone to know that you have any affiliation with Penn. And so part of this is also restoring like a more principled
This is very interesting.
relationship between Penn knowing that it's an important institution in the city and the rest of the city.
Wow, this is very interesting. Could I, if you don't mind, could I go on to the group in India?
Yeah.
And then we'll go to
MIT.
Caleb. Can we go to MIT if there's?
Okay, this is a description which was sent to me by Nantha and Raju describing their work. So I'll be reading
in what city?
It'll get to that in the description. In India, so this is me speaking for them, reading what they wrote, I mean. So since February, we have been based in Bangalore, a city of the south of India. In April this year, we organized an event commemorating 50 years of the liberation of Bangladesh and remembering the heroic Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. For this event, we had an online discussion with Dr. Montero, Professor Prabhat Patnaik, and Rahman Sohan, who was a colleague of Sheikh Mujib leading the international campaign for Bangladeshi liberation and was also a member of the first Planning Commission of Bangladesh. The discussion brought to light the importance of the united front formed by Sheikh Mujib for the Bangladeshi struggle, the role of imperialism against his attempts to form a state of the whole people, and the solidarity given by world forces to the struggle, including Philadelphia's own longshoremen. The discussion also highlighted the importance of the rise of China for third world nations like Bangladesh. In October, we organized a series of events to commemorate the centenary of the Communist Party of China. We formed a temporary committee for friendship between the Indian and Chinese people. We approached a broad set of organizations to partner in this endeavor. This included the Gandhi Global Family, the Khwaja Ahmad Abbas Memorial Trust, the India-China Friendship Association, and the Forum for a New South Asia. Unfortunately, we did not receive support from the organized left. Nevertheless, these particular organizations constituted a broad section of progressive forces in India. Our first event was a film screening of the movie Dr. Kotnis Ki Amar Kahani, Dr. Kotnis' Eternal Story, in Bangalore, to celebrate the life of Dr. Kotnis, an Indian revolutionary who gave his life to the Chinese struggle. We then had a discussion on the parallel but distinct nature of the Indian and Chinese struggles. Our final event was a discussion between Martin Jacques and Sudhindra Kulkarni on the collapse of the West and the rise of China. Through our activities in India this year and our interaction with the left and other political forces in India, we have come to see the importance of the ideological struggle and a framework to engage with it. We feel that the framework that the Saturday Free School has collectively developed, which draws on the linking of Du Bois, Baldwin, and King, has something to say not just for the American situation, but to all of humanity. These ideas are capable of addressing the human problems of this time. So far in our experiences, we have found that there is a deep ideological crisis in in India. The left has largely abandoned the ideological struggle, and no political force is offering a positive vision which can unite the nation against the forces of imperialism. At the same time, Indian society and the Indian people continue to be optimistic and hopeful about the future, and there is no sign of the deep social catastrophe that confronts the West. The neo-colonial character of the current situation is reflected in all institutions of the country, including academia and the media. We feel a deep lack of self-confidence, especially among the intellectuals who look to the white world in all fields and do not appreciate the crisis of the West. There has also been a systematic attack on Indian culture and music. Currently, we, along with others in the Saturday Free School, are engaged in a study of the Indian freedom struggle to understand the essence of the revolutionary struggle in the context of the Indian situation. Next year marks 75 years of India's independence. We want to commemorate this by starting a reading group in Bangalore, as part of which we will read figures such as Nehru, Rabindranath Tagore, Gandhi, and W.E.B. Du Bois, among others. Further, we want to emphasize the relationship between the Indian freedom struggle and the world movement for freedom. For this, we are thinking of organizing several events next year. One of these will be an event discussing democracy and the civilization state, possibly as a dialogue between Indian, Chinese, and Afro-American intellectuals. We are further thinking of an event on Du Bois, Lenin, and Gandhi, trying to synthesize the thinking of these different revolutionary figures for our time.
I could just say one thing, because I was talking with Raju and Nanditha about this dialogue on democracy, which would be India, China, and the Black Freedom Movement. And, I was very struck by how, I use the word subversive, this kind of conversation is in India. And, but I think it could be a really great event. We talked about, academics and scholars from China, academics and scholars from India, and prominent academics and scholars from the Black Freedom Movement, including, I guess I could say this, Angela Davis, Cornel West, and some others. And everybody doesn't have to agree on everything, but a different kind of discussion and recentering the discussion of democracy. Are there any questions? Okay, let's go. Where do we have to go now to? I'm sorry, Caleb and MIT.
Yeah. I can read the message that Susanna sent, and also she's going to post it in the comments.
Just speak up just a little bit, Caleb.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's see. So this is from Susanna. We are currently a group of around 7 dedicated undergraduates and have begun our study on the works and lives of James Boggs and Grace Lee Boggs. For the past couple weeks, we have been discussing Grace Lee Boggs and the similarities between hers and our backgrounds as people coming from the academic elite and are lauded for their ability to add value to society, whatever this actually means. Most MIT students following their education either accept comfortable, high-paying jobs for large tech corporations, become financial consultants, go into academia, or any career path which further obscures what the issues we are actually up against today, but they feel forced to keep working out of a sense of fear of not having enough for themselves in their lives. As of now, the vast majority of students at MIT lack substantial political awareness and consciousness. There is generally a sense of aimlessness and hopelessness among students, where we spend our time learning technical skills and becoming convinced we are the future's leaders who understand the truth of the world through our true understanding of science, math, and engineering, but carry out a sense of emptiness where deep down students don't really believe there is or can be meaning in their lives. All of this while never being taught where this emptiness comes from. What I've noticed most though, not sure if it's because MIT is a technology school, is that people don't understand how to develop distinctly human relationships, how do we talk to each other beyond our roles as just students, beyond people seeking to earn a six-figure salary, beyond people seeking academic prestige, but as people who care about fighting for democracy, the dignity of all people, and reclaiming a sense of meaning to the technological work we do, who are capable of going beyond our fears and anxieties. The question we're tackling with our reading group is how do we form these meaningful relationships based on a shared vision for what the future should be and what our problems today are, and how do we think of ourselves as not simply developing more technology, which will never meaningfully address our social issues in our current state, but we think ourselves as having political agency. How do we go beyond caring about having enough for ourselves, having dignity for ourselves, but first and foremost for all people?
I think we have to do more to get them down here more often. Yeah. Because I think but they did address the question of Sophie and Nathan. You know, the question on these college campuses of meaning. You know, of human, of the we rather than just the me. I think this is.
Yeah, I thought that was important too.
Yeah. Anybody else want to?
What was the last two lines? Could you read it again? I'm sorry.
The last two lines were, how do we go beyond caring about having enough for ourselves,
Right.
having dignity for ourselves, but first and foremost for all people?
The we question.
Yeah. What was the line before that? I'm sorry.
Readable people.
Sideways too.
Sideways.
The line before that, it's a longer sentence, but the questions we're tackling with our reading group is how do we form these meaningful relationships based on a shared vision for what the future should be and what our problems today are, and how do we think of ourselves as not simply developing more technology, which will never meaningfully address our social issues in our current state, but we think ourselves as having political agency.
I like that. You know, like going past there is that ultra technology, everything, or the technology is going to solve all our problems. Objects will never save us. You know,
or even technology will never save
Exactly.
us. You're right, and you're so absolutely right.
He's talking from Baldwin.
Huh?
He's talking from Baldwin.
Oh, from Paul.
I
thought that was you, Jay.
I was. It was plus. You know what I mean? Fair.
Yeah.
What I am saying is, I think it's important that there is a type of, or that they're striving for a political agency, and especially in like MIT is like, I don't even know, like from X, Y, Z, and MIT seems like it's like such a dead zone, or I don't know. I don't know. It just
it's
seems
a very
so.
powerful place.
That's not what I'm saying.
In fact,
Not
that's
what I'm
where
saying.
Noam Chomsky comes out of.
Okay.
I'm
I'm saying more so just so much technology driven. It just seems like, I guess spiritually, that's kind of what I'm saying. Maybe.
No question.
Yeah, these tech schools, it's like a diplomatic environment. That's how Carnegie Mellon is.
That's what you are.
Yeah. Like the undergrads, I mean, like they kind of feel like they have like the statement said, like they don't really think about anything except technology, six-figure jobs, and like everybody's just, it's hard to get them interested in anything else in my experience so far. But anyway, professors are also not helping.
Well, this is very important what you said. But see, that mindset that you're talking about, Jay, has now morphed over into the human and social sciences. This technological, positivistic, approach. And so
digital humanity.
Digital
That's the
humanity.
latest thing. It's just they're encouraging everybody to do that. Why don't you take Du Bois and make these what do they call those things?
NFTs?
Word maps.
Oh, God.
Where you can map out one word. Yeah, word maps, or these things where you make a data map where his degrees of removal from other people, William James or whatever, That's the type of thing. Just don't actually read and try to understand these things. Just try to, how can we quantify it?
Quantify
That's where most of the money is.
All the
Using
qualities.
quantitative, data-driven, cloud computing, all that stuff.
Yeah, the crisis of meaning.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's like to be a student
Yeah.
in the social.
The thing I wanted to point out from Susanna's message is when she says,
Whose message?
Susanna,
Oh,
what
Susanna.
Caleb read, that we, as students and young people, don't know how to have genuine human relationships anymore. And this is why there's no student movement right now, is we don't even know how to come together and be like, how are we as young people responsible, and how are we going to be a force of history and an agent, and have political agency anymore. It's like we're so weak, the conditions are so bad that the best we can do is like make a mutual aid donation because we're Penn students and we feel guilty about being at Penn. But what Susanna's talking about is so important because like if the MIT student can transform into someone that can see themselves as an agent of change on the human level, then that means that our generation like has so much to gain and so much to create.
No, it's nothing really big. I just admire the way we're doing this. I admire where we're all kind of coming from and the goal that we want to achieve. I think it's a really good thing, and I think that you know, from what you're saying, Sophie, like to be human beings, to be able to contribute something and make something out of this country. Like same thing, scientists who have a role in building society, you know. It's the same thing, artists who have a role in building, you know, making something. That's the thing with the child, that's the thing with the question of democracy. Really, or even the Russia and America, understanding that we all kind of came to, being able to see a society in which people, politically educated people, were able to have the dignity and build what they found fit for their situation and what they needed. And I really admire that what this means is like it has an ultimate goal of politically educating others around us, you know, to be able to rebuild society in the sense I'm saying rebuild in terms of this crisis that this country is facing. Like we really, in a way, to me, and I don't mean to get too excited, but it is something that, it is a heavy responsibility. And I feel as though I'm glad that I'm in a room with people who are willing to do that. And you know, I'm just saying this is, it's just the broadness of the areas that we are tackling. And I just wanted to say that, but.
I can't tell you how glad I am to be in the room with people like you all. And you know, I often think about my own role in all of this because you know, age-wise, I'm not in your cohort. You know what I'm saying? And but it is not a problem for me at all. I just hope it's not a problem for you all.
So what?
I don't know, you know.
Well, Doc, there'll be challenges though. That's what.
Pardon
That's
me,
what,
say
there's
that
gonna be challenges. That's what's gonna happen. You know, like there's gonna be a lot of what we're dealing with is people.
Yeah.
And by the singularity, you know what I'm saying? Like the one person who comes in and all their problems and stuff.
Yup.
And then, you know, our group and all our problems, and now we got this other person coming in with all their shit,
Yeah.
and then we gotta do that, what Emil pointed out, build a principle of unity with forces that, you know.
Absolutely.
But there's gonna be that.
No, but I'm just saying, I don't feel any disconnect from you all.
Okay.
And the way you all talk is the way I would talk whether everybody in here was my age.
Well, that's true.
But the other thing is, I don't think I could find a community like this one if everybody was my age. Because most of them have already sold out. Or maybe they sold out even before they got to this age. I know you all sometimes feel a certain amount of dissatisfaction with your generation. You don't want to hear me talk about my generation at this point, because then I have to get to cursing and I'm in a church.
Oh, sorry, Doc.
But, I mean, you all do constitute what is in effect a vanguard. And I mean that in the broadest sense of what Du Bois would call a guiding 100, a leading group who lead with ideas and with art and with genuine concern for people. And nobody can miss this. Nobody. The genuineness of the free school. And that means all of us together. And we are the same in that respect. Our values make us who we are, and we share these values, and we've worked so hard to develop these values. I guess you would say it like that. But I don't know. Another time I'll talk more about how I see my role. And first thing I would just tell you, I have no interest. I don't try to in any fake way abdicate my responsibility. You know, in a fake way, well, let us all come together. You know, that doesn't appeal to me. You know, huh?
That's not how we came together.
No, that's not. But, you know, I have a very unique experience, not just because I'm older than you all, but because I've had a unique experience. And I grew up in a different period of struggle in the world and in this country. And that's what I always try to share. That's why I'm always telling stories about different things and such. And then, of course, I'm from here. I've always grew up in Philadelphia. A lot of it, like Father Washington, I know him. I know a lot of people in the city. I know the way the city kind of works. And so I would not abdicate my responsibility to share all that I know, all that I have experienced with you all. And I'm not one of these people who is trying to hold back. If I know something, I'll share it. And that's what I try to do in the free school. I sometimes, and this, how do I express this? You know, when people leave the free school for whatever reasons, and there are many reasons, and it's like Serafina said, the human factor. And the human factor is a complex thing. People sometimes have emotional, personal problems. And I could identify people who have experienced those in the free school, and they just have to leave. You know, it's not that they're against the free school, it's that things are going on with them and have been going on with them. Others leave for ideological reasons, often obscured as other things, but nonetheless ideological. Some people leave because they can't have their way, you know, in the free school. And as you know, our experiences kind of proven it's good that they didn't have their way, some of them. Because I don't know whether you remember, you guys, anybody here remembers this, but if Meghna was here, I guess you were around, Jahan. We had some serious battles with identity politics people. I mean, well, we had to read Audre Lorde. I know I had to read the biography, Audre Lorde's biography. We had to get clear because it was a question of Baldwin or Audre Lorde, and it was that question. And people, you know, left really. I mean, I know if Meghna and Nunitha were here, they could describe just what I'm saying. People left angry. And they accuse, see this thing, it's not a matter of whether you're trans or not trans, gay or not gay. That's not the question. The question is the weaponization of it against the working people and the democratic aspirations of working people. And come on, that's what it is. Nobody has ever been asked to leave the free school because of their sexuality. And let me tell you, by my estimate, and I don't know this to be a fact because we don't ask, I would say at least 1/4, probably more of the free school are non-heterosexual. At least. And you guys don't know half of the story because it's not a public issue. I'm talking about on the old head side. Not just on the young head side. Yeah, so, but what the free school opposed was this fake solidarity with gay, lesbian, trans people. And it is fake because it's not about the majority of them. Never was. So we had to go through that. That, you know, I know Michelle and I talk about things like this, and I said, girl, you ain't been through nothing. There have been some serious challenges to what we are, what we have become. Some people thought we shouldn't have done the Year of Gandhi. There were people in the broad community who did everything they could to undermine the Year of Du Bois, including the rapping professor on WURD. Yeah. It was quite, but nonetheless, you know, we continue. And the other thing is, I would say, try to talk about how I see my role. I was just going to say, I don't abdicate my responsibilities to be at free school every week, to be on time at free school, to think about how we're framing the week's discussion. That has fallen upon my shoulders. That's my responsibility. I'm not taking this away from anybody else, but this is what I must do. You know what I'm saying? And I think that in operating like this, I operate with the agreement of most people in the free school. Those who think otherwise, they wouldn't come back. But I think those who think otherwise have resorted to pettiness and just trying to find some way to find something wrong with something that's so good as the free school. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Something that is so good. And the other thing, so good for so many people. That helps so many people. So you have to find people, and there's a politic to it, there's a personality thing to it. And you'll find this, I know when I talk to Michelle, I try to explain this experience. that you're never going to completely eradicate pettiness, jealousy, competition, envy. So the free school is doing better now than ever. But some people want to leave. You say, well, why are you leaving? Some people say, well, because you're not reading enough books. I don't know how much more reading we could do. I'm trying to keep up myself. But I guess what I would say is sometimes you have done so well in achieving what you set out to achieve. Like Magna said in her calculation, I think over the last 5 years, there have been 19 major political educational events put on by the free school. I don't think there's anyone in this city, I'd even go as far as New York. I don't think anyone has done as many events to educate the people. And not just the free school by itself. It's the free school with Mother Bethlehem E-Church. It's the free school co-sponsoring the China event, the Winston event, with the Church of the Advocate. It's the free school doing Palestine and other events with 1199C. It's the free school living in the community that we're situated in.
Can I just tag on? Because that's a very serious statement.
Yes,
what you
go,
just
go,
said
go,
is
go, go.
very serious. Like 19 events to politically educate people in Philadelphia. I emphasize that. I just find that to be such a serious thing because, like, sometimes it's the same people. Sometimes it's just us. Sometimes it's more people. Sometimes
I don't know when it's ever been just us.
well, smaller events. But
Okay, good.
let me make a point, please. Because what I'm saying here is that, you know, the development and the education that the people that come to the free school have over the course of time has led us, well, to this point, but also has, like, I don't know what, but I just find it to be such a profound thing that over the course of however 10 years at this point, 19 events, we have reached a point and where we're trying to figure out where we are. You know what I mean? But also we're at a stage of political advancement where we can push Philadelphia.
Absolutely. And that's true, Jake. That is true. And you cannot quantify things like this. But I think all of us would say something is different in Philadelphia because of the existence of the free school.
Yeah.
Yes.
If there were not a free school, just for ourselves, I know it'd be hard to imagine Philadelphia at this stage. Something has changed. We haven't made the revolution, of course, but something is different because of the free school. And now we want to even go further. But
Which means also that there's something different because of the people of the free school.
absolutely, that's the point. That's it. And that's why, you know, I can't see myself patronizing you all.
Right.
Oh, you're young people, you don't know. No.
Right.
I see you as very responsible political agents in this city. And I think what you all have done proves it. And surmounting and solving political issues going forward. The China event solved a number, just to organize it. The the Winston event. And of course, we have to face all the time the boycott, the smear, the talk behind the back kind of thing. But it is a credit to you all. And that's why your ages are not as important as your political, ideological, and moral character. You all don't operate like young people are supposed to operate in this society. Depressed all, if you're at an elite university, depressed all the time. You're here on Saturday at 10 o'clock and earlier. I mean, which means that you weren't out drinking all night or smoking weed all night. You know what I'm saying? That you know you have to be here, you're here. And then the organization of all of these satellites all over the place that are doing different things, specific things. It's such a statement. But the other thing is, I would just say, going forward, there's still questions, and these are, Michelle asked the question of transitions. Tara asked me this question too, about the idea of the vanguard party and how would it function? Or she asked me something, do we need a vanguard party at this time of the Leninist type? And I think that's a question that's on the table.
Really?
Oh yeah. Well, when I say that, because of the great history of Leninism, what it achieved, what it contributed, yada, 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 yada. Well, but maybe we're in a different stage of history. And the form of political, social organization will be different. I could talk about that a little bit more. But in the fight for democracy and peace, the transition to new forms of popular, by popular I mean people's organizations and coalitions, even more important than the vanguard party.
Yeah.
What is the United Front? What is the role of the church? What is the role of the union? What is the role of especially the historically black institutions like universities, yada, 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 yada. That is the big question, because people will move not because they are led in that sense of a singular leadership, but because they are organized.
Yes.
And this is a big question. And I think that the free school comes closest to what might be the movement of a new type in a world that is unlike anything previous revolutionary generations have imagined or seen, for a lot of reasons. But I just want to say one other thing about my role. And sometimes I'm conscious of how our ages make us different. I mean, because I don't hang out with y'all. You all know more about me than I know about you all, which I don't always appreciate. I don't. I feel I'm more transparent with you all than you all are with me.
Yes, Serafina.
You don't want to know everything anyway. Just
Well, how do you
Do
know?
you?
But if I don't
Now
want to
you
know,
wanna know.
well, I do want to know more than I know. Or I'll put it this way: I don't want you all knowing everything about me,
Yeah.
and I don't know nothing about y'all.
We see your cards,
For
but not
instance,
ours.
for example, I had no idea that you all curse as much as you do. I mean, I didn't. I had no idea. That's why I always ask permission when I'm around you all. Do you mind if I curse? If you notice, I haven't been doing that lately. Because I found out how much you all curse. You know, I didn't know they cursed as much as they do in Asia. I didn't know. But I say, that's only an example that I just don't know. I'm more transparent with you all than you all are with me. I feel. Maybe I'm subjective. But anyway, that's one thing.
Everyone circle up and share a secret.
Say that one more time.
We're all gonna share a secret.
No, that's okay.
See?
I'm more than comfortable with it. because I really don't have that much to hide. And pretty much what I am is like the free school, and then sometime to myself when it's not the free school. But yeah, it's nothing, you know. There's one other thing, just one more thing. I just feel, and I have to say, even with my experience in the Communist Party and different movements and all that kind of stuff, I feel that the free school has afforded me the opportunity to learn. And every experience, whether it's working on Winston, China event, Du Bois, the year of Du Bois, really in the interaction, I won't say I learned from you, but I learned from our collective work together. I was saying to Michelle how rich that experience of organizing the China event, that was 6 months. How rich that was, how enriching it was, you know? And of course, you know, I had the opportunity to work with Serafina, and I had no idea. I had no idea who Serafina was. But I could say, but Serafina is not Serafina that she was 6 months ago. That's why it's hard for somebody to come, oh, I've been away from the free school for a year. I'm going to come back. Oh, I could say, yeah, come on back, but it's not the same. Because the upward trajectory, especially of you all, the younger ones, is so quick, so fast, that if you come back, if you saw Michelle a year ago, 2 years ago, and you see her now, you're looking at two different people.
Yeah, for real.
You're looking at two different people. I mean, I could say about Sophie when she first came here. I could say about Caleb. I could say about Jake. I could say about every person in this room. The transformations have been so dramatic, you know, that it's you wouldn't recognize. If you're away from the free school for 6 months, you come back, you wouldn't recognize the free school because you wouldn't know the people. And you know, I'm having the opportunity to experience and enjoy all of this, and it is a joyful thing. I don't have any criticism of the free school. I really don't. If I would, you know, probe into what would I criticize about the free school? I don't know what I would. I don't think there's anything. I think it is as close to the political organization and ideological organization for this time of anything I could imagine. I don't think there's any, I don't know how you could do it any better than this. I really do. Now with certain improvements, we'll talk about, I don't know how you do it any better than this. Because, you know, one of the problems of the left is that they're completely, how do you put it? Just completely overweighted, burdened with bureaucratism. And they can't think. One thing about over bureaucratic organizations, by trying to be something that you're really not going to be, that is, quote, the, you know, the stereotype of the Leninist part, you're not going to be that, money. You know, I mean, I could go name by name, but they're not going. But then, in trying to be that, they do not afford themselves, and especially for the young people, enough space to think and to grow.
That's the last priority.
Go ahead.
No, just in these groups, I mean, for one thing, most of them are about 30 years too late to be the
Absolutely.
party.
I would say that.
And they're trying to imitate a lot of things, but
Yeah.
I mean, on their list, the absolute last thing is thinking, is ideological, struggle or work, basically. That they usually just put in the hands of a couple of people and then they just regurgitate, and that's what they call the party line, the official line. That's why that's why a lot of people get burned out of those things too, because I've seen from most of these kind of left groups, the average turnover is usually, in my experience, like maybe 2-3 years, and then people are usually done with it because you just can't. You can't sustain organizing protests, going to protests, selling papers. After a while, you see it's not going anywhere because you see it's not turning into a mass phenomenon, and then you move on and do something else with your life for the most part. So yeah, either that or the other ones which don't claim to be Leninist but are basically just acting as wings of the Democratic Party. Those also people either get disillusioned or they totally just become part of the ruling class apparatus and have these careers. So yeah, that's the problem. Ideological clarity, ideological struggle, intellectual work is very degraded in the left and activism.
The thing that young people need most.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing that young people need most. And they deprive young people of that, especially in the period of their lives when they, they're so excited by ideas and culture and art and all that type of thing, and you say, well, that's not important, and this is what you must do. That, if I could just give a historical example, that is what happened to the American Trotskyist movement. And that led to, you hear about the neocons, the war makers, and all of those. Well, a big part of them come out of the New York Trotskyists.
Arguing with the World.
Pardon me?
Arguing with the World is a documentary of all of them.
Oh, Arguing with the
Yeah, it's
World.
on YouTube, I think, yeah.
Wow. But that, I'm sorry, please, go ahead.
Oh, this is like, who's the guy, the National Review guy?
Irving Kristol.
Yeah. Crystal, Hal, the PSA people, all the chat.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And it's that loss of meaning. You paint yourself into such a narrow corner that you can go no further with this ideology, this narrow ideology. So you say, well, I'll contribute to changing the world by joining the imperialists. Yeah, but but that's one. I've learned this by being around you all. You cannot say to young people, stop growing. Fit into some stereo. Oh yeah, man, that's what we're describing. And that's why you're going to see, I don't know how you feel about this, John, but you're going to see some of the left organizations begin to unravel because the young people can't stay in there. It's too confining. It takes their breath. It takes their life from them.
It might create new right-wing people.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
they'll be like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I did that. I found it was wrong. Now let me go to the opposite end.
Yeah.
That's the thing about the crisis of the left in the city.
Absolutely.
What happened overseas? We went through yeah, and it's just interesting because what's left is the preschool.
Well, see, let me show you another thing, and I agree with you. What we take for granted is just common sense for us. You work with churches, Church of Advocate, Mother Bethel, whatever other churches, Calvary, whatever other church. You work with people. Do you realize they don't know how to do that?
Yeah, they don't.
They really don't know how to do it. For us, it's just what we do, but they don't know how to do it. So they can only paint themselves into a more narrow corner. Well, folks, goes. I know Serafina has to go to work. And I know Reverend Lee is having something which maybe we can attend. Is that so?
I don't know. All the people that know about it,
They're already there.
I know you go.
Huh?
If you guys want to go,
Yeah, just
I think they're doing something. He's doing something for Christmas or something.
yeah, something like that.
Well, I just want to say,
Let me introduce you.
I met some folks in the beginning, but I'm Dash. I'm the show.
She's from New York.
nice
It
to
was
meet
such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you. Okay.
Sherry said wanted to say one last.
Oh, I'm sorry.
oh no, nothing. I just wanted to apologize for being late. I
That's
was,
okay. Don't worry about it, man.
Play that.
What?
You do so much.
No, I was up cleaning, like, really late.
Don't worry
Till
about
6 in the morning.
You do. You know, I thank
I was.
Jake and Serafina
No,
have
really,
for
I-
the last few
don't even
years.
go here because then I feel more bad.
Whenever we come in here, whatever time we get here, and we see the tables and chairs set up. And they've been doing it
I was up cleaning.
for a long time.
That's what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
you do good. You bring good.
Thank you, Serafina. Thank you, Jake.
Go ahead.
I didn't say hi to you guys.
Okay, well, this is
We're happy to see you again.
You know.
I mean, so it's.
You're allowed one time.
Yeah.
So next time, never
Then
get
you're
it.
out of the basket. It's worse. I remember this time. Excuse me.
This is the day that will go down in infamy.
Whoever Serafina's way. Mark my calendars. We'll
Okay,
come back and
folks.
celebrate next year. Sorry.
Shabarta is back from India. We'll have to hear
Shabarta!
more from India. And he brought some Indian treats.
Nice.
Yeah,
Delicious.
thank you.
They're creamy.
Yeah, I see what I can.
Yes.
Is this over today? Oh, separate. Oh, that's the speaker?